When my daughter looked me in the eyes at my husband's funeral and hissed, "Don't expect a dime from Daddy's fortune," I felt my heart shatter into 1,000 pieces. 3 days later, I discovered the truth my husband had hidden from everyone. That's when I realized that sometimes revenge doesn't need planning. It just needs patience. If you're watching this and you know what it feels like when family betrays you, subscribe now and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Because trust me, what happens next will make your jaw hit the floor. They say grief comes in waves. That's a lie. Grief is an ocean that swallows you whole, and you either learn to breathe underwater or you drown. When Richard died, I couldn't breathe. After 43 years of marriage, the man who had held my hand through everything was gone. Just gone. The heart attack came without warning. One minute we were planning our anniversary trip to the coast, and the next, I was following an ambulance with hazard lights flashing, praying to a God I wasn't sure I believed in anymore. "Martha, I'm sorry." The doctor's face told me everything before his words did. We did everything we could. I don't remember much after that. Just the cold of the hospital corridor. The smell of antiseptic that burned my nose. The weight of Richard's wedding ring in my palm after they gave me his personal effects in a clear plastic bag. But grief wasn't the only thing I had to face. No, that would have been too simple, too merciful. What waited for me at home was far worse than the emptiness Richard left behind. Our daughter Elaine had arrived with her husband, Kenneth. I'd hoped, foolishly perhaps, that she'd come to comfort me, to help with the funeral arrangements, to be the daughter I thought I'd raised. I found them in Richard's study when I returned from the hospital. Elaine was rifling through his desk drawers while Kenneth examined the safe behind the painting, a hiding place they shouldn't have even known about. "What are you doing?" My voice sounded strange even to my own ears. Hollow. Elaine didn't even have the decency to look embarrassed. She straightened up, tucking a strand of her expensively highlighted hair behind her ear, and said, "Someone has to take care of the estate, Mother. Daddy wouldn't want his affairs left in disarray." "The estate," I repeated, the words not quite making sense through my fog of grief. "Yes, Mother." Her tone was impatient, like I was a child interrupting an important conversation. "The properties, the investments, the accounts. Everything needs to be secured." Kenneth closed the safe, unable to open it without the combination. He turned to me with that smile I'd never trusted. All teeth, no warmth. "Martha," he said, using my first name like he always did, despite my repeated requests to call me Mrs. Harrington. "We're just trying to help. Richard would want us to take care of everything." Something cold slithered down my spine. "I can handle my husband's affairs," I said, finding strength somewhere deep inside. "The funeral home needs decisions made. If you want to help, you can help with that." Elaine exchanged a look with Kenneth that made my stomach churn. "About that, Mother. We've already called Westfield Funeral Directors. They're preparing everything as we speak, the premium package. It's what Daddy deserves." Without consulting me? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I'm his wife. I should be the one to... "Oh, Mother." Elaine sighed dramatically. "You're in no state to make these decisions. You can barely stand up straight. We're doing you a favor." I felt like I was watching this scene from outside my body. My daughter, my only child, the little girl I'd sacrificed everything for, was taking control as if I weren't even there. As if I were already gone too. "I want you to leave the study," I said quietly. "Now." Kenneth stepped forward, his 6 feet 2 inches frame towering over me. "Martha, be reasonable. There's a lot that needs to be handled. The business, the assets. Get out." I surprised myself with the force of my voice. "This is my house, and you will respect my wishes." Elaine slammed the door shut. "Fine. But we need to talk about the will soon. There are decisions that need to be made." They brushed past me, and I caught the scent of Elaine's perfume, the one Richard had bought her for Christmas last year. $500 a bottle. Nothing but the best for his little girl. Once they were gone, I collapsed into Richard's leather chair, running my fingers over the worn armrests where his hands had rested for countless hours. The study smelled like him, leather, mint, and that expensive cologne he'd worn since our 20th anniversary. I closed my eyes and could almost feel him there. "What am I going to do, Richard?" I whispered to the empty room. "What am I supposed to do now?" The answer came in the form of the phone ringing. It was James Mercer, Richard's attorney and oldest friend. "Martha, I just heard." "I'm so sorry." His voice cracked a little. He and Richard had been roommates in law school before James went on to build one of the most prestigious firms in the city, and Richard chose the business world instead. "Thank you, James. I couldn't muster more than that. I know this isn't the time, but I need to see you. Tomorrow, if possible. There are matters we need to discuss." Elaine and Kenneth are already here. They're taking charge. There was a pause on the line. "Don't sign anything, Martha. Don't agree to anything. Not until we talk." The urgency in his voice cut through my fog. "James, what's going on?" "Not over the phone. Just promise me."
"No signatures, no agreements."
"Nothing." "I promise," I said, a sense of unease replacing some of the numbness. "Good. I'll come to you. 10 tomorrow morning." After hanging up, I sat in silence, trying to make sense of it all. Why would James warn me like that? What was happening that I couldn't see? I pulled open the center drawer of Richard's desk, not even sure what I was looking for. Inside was the usual clutter: pens, paper clips, a half-empty roll of mints. But tucked in the back was a small leather notebook I'd never seen before. Richard's handwriting filled the pages, dates, numbers, and notes that made little sense to me. The last entry was dated just 3 days before his death. E and K discussed boat purchase again. Mentioned mother's inheritance. Time to finalize changes with J. E and K, Elaine and Kenneth. Mother's inheritance. My mother had left me a modest sum when she passed 5 years ago. I'd put it into a college fund for any grandchildren Elaine might have one day. But why would they be discussing that with Richard? And what changes was he planning to finalize with Jay, presumably James? I flipped back through the notebook, finding more cryptic entries. E asked for advance on inheritance again. Denied. K's business proposal reviewed. Not viable. Third failed venture. E angry about Aspen property decision. Said we're holding them back. A picture was forming, one I didn't want to see. For years, Richard had maintained strict control over our finances. Elaine received a generous allowance, but Richard had always been clear that the bulk of his fortune would transfer after both of us were gone. He believed in working for success, not waiting for inheritance. Had Elaine and Kenneth been pressuring him? Were they expecting him to change his mind? I closed the notebook as the doorbell rang. Through the front window, I could see more cars arriving, relatives, friends, neighbors. All coming to offer condolences. All expecting to find a grieving widow surrounded by a supportive family. What they found instead was a woman standing alone in her foyer, clutching a small leather book like a shield, with dried tears on her face and a dawning realization in her eyes. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of black clothes and hushed voices. People filled my house, eating food I didn't remember preparing, saying words that didn't penetrate the fog around me. Elaine played the part of the grieving daughter perfectly, dabbing at tears that never fell, accepting hugs with gracious nods, standing beside me as if we were united in our loss. Kenneth worked the room like a politician, shaking hands, accepting condolences, speaking in reverent tones about the legacy Richard leaves behind and how they would ensure his vision continues. I watched it all as if from a great distance, smiling when appropriate, thanking people for coming, playing my role as the grieving widow. But inside, a small flame had begun to burn. Not grief, not even anger yet. Just awareness. Sharp, clear awareness that something wasn't right. That night, after everyone had gone and Elaine and Kenneth had retreated to the guest suite, I returned to Richard's study. I didn't turn on the lights. Instead, I sat in the darkness, letting my eyes adjust, feeling Richard's presence all around me. "What were you trying to tell me?" I whispered, running my fingers over the notebook again. "What didn't you get to say?" I must have dozed off in the chair because I woke to the sound of hushed voices in the hallway. The grandfather clock in the corner showed 2:17 a.m. Moving too quickly, Elaine was saying, her voice barely audible through the door I'd left slightly ajar. She's already suspicious. We don't have a choice, Kenneth replied. The reading is in 3 days. Once that's done, we need to be ready to move. What if she contests it? She could delay everything. Kenneth's laugh was soft but cruel. On what grounds? Your father made his wishes clear. Besides, she doesn't have the stomach for a legal battle.
Not now.
I still think we should. Elaine's voice faded as they moved down the hallway toward their room. I sat frozen in the dark, my heart pounding. The reading? In 3 days? Why hadn't James mentioned that? And what were they so certain about? The way they talked, it sounded like they knew exactly what was in Richard's will. Like they had no doubts about what would happen next. I waited until I was sure they were gone, then crept through the dark house to my bedroom. Not our bedroom anymore. Just mine. The emptiness of it hit me anew as I closed the door behind me. Sleep didn't come. Instead, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, piecing together what little I knew. By the time dawn broke, I had made a decision. I wouldn't be the passive widow they expected. I would find out what was happening. At precisely 10 o'clock, James arrived. He looked older than when I'd last seen him at our Christmas party 6 months ago. His silver hair was disheveled, and his eyes were rimmed with red. He'd been crying for his friend. "Martha," he said, embracing me tightly. "I'm so sorry. Thank you for coming, James. We need to talk privately." I led him to the sunroom at the back of the house, the one place I could be sure Elaine and Kenneth wouldn't intrude. It had been my sanctuary for years, filled with my plants, my books, my little treasures. Richard had called it Martha's Museum of Happiness. Once we were seated, James pulled out a folder from his briefcase. "Before we discuss anything else, I need to give you this." Inside was a sealed envelope with my name written in Richard's distinctive handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. "My dearest Martha, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and James has fulfilled his promise to get this to you immediately. I'm sorry for the secrets I've kept. I thought I had more time. For the past year, I've watched our daughter change. Or perhaps the change happened long ago, and I was too blind to see it. The greed, the entitlement, the coldness toward you. It breaks my heart. I've made changes to my will, Martha. Changes that Elaine doesn't know about. She and Kenneth believe they have everything arranged, but they're wrong. Trust James. Tell him everything. And remember that no matter what happens next, you were the best decision I ever made. All my love, Richard." I read the letter twice, then looked up at James with tears streaming down my face. What changes? What does he mean? James leaned forward. "Richard came to me 3 months ago, very concerned about Elaine and Kenneth's behavior. He believed they were waiting for him to die." The words hit me like a physical blow.
No.
She wouldn't. He showed me texts, emails. They'd been pressuring him about his estate planning, asking detailed questions about his assets, suggesting he simplify things by putting properties in their names. But why wouldn't he tell me? James sighed. He was trying to protect you, and he needed to be sure before he took action. Action? What action? He changed his will, Martha. The previous version, from 5 years ago, split everything between you and Elaine, with you as the primary beneficiary. The new will. He hesitated. "Tell me." "The new will leaves everything to you. Everything. The house, the business, the investments. All of it." I felt like I couldn't breathe. "And Elaine gets nothing?" "There's a provision for her. A trust that activates when you pass away. But while you're alive, you control everything." The room seemed to spin around me. "She'll fight it. They both will." Richard anticipated that. The will includes a no-contest clause. If Elaine challenges it in court, she loses even the future trust. She gets nothing ever. I stood up, needing to move, to process this. She and Kenneth were in the hallway last night. They said something about the reading being in 3 days. But you haven't told me about any reading. James frowned. "The reading is scheduled for Friday at my office. I was going to tell you today, but they shouldn't know that yet. I haven't informed them. Then how do they know? And why do they seem so confident about what's in it? James's expression darkened. That's concerning. Very concerning. Before he could say more, the sunroom door opened, and Elaine stood there. Her face was composed, but her eyes burned with something I'd never seen before, or perhaps had never allowed myself to see. Mother, I've been looking everywhere for you. Oh, James, I didn't realize you were here. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. What a nice surprise. Elaine, James nodded, his professional mask sliding into place. I came to express my condolences and discuss some preliminary matters with your mother. How thoughtful. But Mother really shouldn't be bothered with business right now. I'm handling all of that. She stepped into the room, uninvited. In fact, Kenneth and I were just discussing the need to consolidate some of Dad's accounts. For simplicity's sake. Nothing will be consolidated or changed until after the will reading, James said firmly. As your father's executor, I have to insist on that. Something flashed across Elaine's face. Anger? Fear? It was gone too quickly to identify. Of course, she said smoothly. I just meant we should be prepared. Making lists, gathering information. Mother is in no state to handle the details. I'm perfectly capable of handling my husband's affairs, I said, finding my voice again. And I'd appreciate it if you'd give James and me some privacy to finish our conversation. Elaine's smile tightened.
Fine.
But don't tire yourself out, Mother. The funeral home called. We need to finalize the arrangements this afternoon. After she left, James and I sat in silence for a moment. She knows something, I finally said. Or thinks she does. Martha, I don't want to alarm you, but is there any way they could have accessed Richard's papers? His computer? The safe. The safe. Kenneth had been trying to open it yesterday. The safe combination, I said slowly. Richard changed it recently. Said it was just good security practice. Did he tell you the new combination? Yes, it's our first apartment number followed by his mother's birthday. Why? James leaned in, lowering his voice. Because the original copy of the new will is in his safe. My office has the official copy, of course, but Richard wanted one at home too. If they got into that safe, they might have seen the will. I finished for him. But that doesn't make sense. If they saw the new will, they'd know they're not getting anything right away. Why would they be acting so confident? James ran a hand through his silver hair. I don't know, but I don't like it. He checked his watch. I need to get back to the office. The reading is Friday at 2 p.m. Until then, be careful what you say to them. And Martha. Yes. Check that safe as soon as you can. After James left, I sat alone in my sunroom, watching the play of light through the stained glass wind chimes Richard had bought me for our 40th anniversary. 3 days until the will reading. 3 days of living with Elaine and Kenneth's veiled hostility and false concern. I could get through this. I had to. That afternoon, we went to the funeral home. Elaine had indeed selected the premium package, the mahogany casket with silk lining, the custom memorial booklets, the video tribute, the catered reception. The bill came to just over $30,000. Sign here, Mrs. Harrington, the funeral director said, sliding the contract across his desk. I remembered James's warning. Don't sign anything. I'd like to review this at home first, I said. Elaine made a small sound of irritation beside me. Mother, everything is in order. I've gone through it all. Nevertheless, I'll review it myself. The service is the day after tomorrow, the funeral director said gently. We do need the contract finalized today. Then I'll review it right now. I pulled the contract closer, ignoring Elaine's glare. As I read through the document, something caught my eye. Under payment arrangements, someone had checked the box for estate billing and written in the name of Richard's company as the responsible party. This isn't correct, I said, pointing to the section. The funeral expenses should come from our joint account, not the company. Kenneth leaned forward. Actually, Martha, billing it to the company makes more sense tax-wise. It can be categorized as a business expense for the founder. That doesn't sound legal, I said. It's a gray area, he replied with that smug smile I'd grown to hate. One that benefits everyone. Change it to our personal account, I insisted to the funeral director. I'll provide the details. Elaine's face flushed with anger. Mother, you're being difficult for no reason. Daddy would want his company to honor him this way. Your father would want things done properly, I countered. And as his widow, the decision is mine. The drive home was silent and tense. When we arrived, Elaine and Kenneth disappeared upstairs without a word. I took the opportunity to slip into Richard's study and check the safe. The painting, a seascape we'd bought on our honeymoon, swung away easily on its hidden hinge. I entered the combination with trembling fingers. 150803323, our old apartment number, 1508, followed by March 23rd, his mother's birthday. The safe door swung open. Empty. Completely empty. The cash Richard always kept for emergencies, gone. The jewelry he'd inherited from his mother, gone. His collection of rare coins, gone. And most importantly, the copy of his will, gone. I sank into his chair, my mind racing. They'd gotten into the safe.
But how?
Richard had changed the combination. Unless he hadn't. Unless that had been a lie. But why would Richard lie to me about something so trivial? Unless it wasn't trivial at all. Unless he'd suspected something even before he changed his will. I picked up the phone and called James. The safe is empty, I said when he answered. Everything is gone, including the will. There was a long pause on the other end. Martha, I need you to listen carefully. I'm sending my security consultant to the house. His name is Michael. Let him in, but don't tell Elaine or Kenneth why he's there. James, what's happening? I don't know yet. But Richard was worried enough to change his will and lie about changing his safe combination. We need to figure out why. Michael arrived an hour later, a compact, serious man with watchful eyes who introduced himself as a home security specialist when Elaine happened to walk by. He swept the study for listening devices, finding none, examined the safe, confirming it hadn't been forced, and installed small, discreet cameras in the study, my bedroom, and the main living areas. The feeds will go directly to Mr. Mercer's secure server, he explained quietly as he worked. If anyone goes where they shouldn't or takes what isn't theirs, we'll have it on record. When he finished, he handed me a small device that looked like a key fob. Panic button, he said simply. Press it if you feel threatened in any way. It alerts both Mr. Mercer and my security team. Do you really think I'm in danger? I asked, the reality of the situation finally hitting me. From my own daughter? Michael's expression remained neutral. Mrs. Harrington, in my line of work, I've learned that the greatest threats often come from those closest to us. Not because they're evil, but because they know exactly where we're vulnerable. After he left, I sat in the gathering darkness of Richard's study, the panic button clutched in my hand, wondering how my life had come to this. My husband was dead. My daughter was a stranger. And in less than 48 hours, I would bury the man I had loved for nearly half a century. The funeral was a blur of black suits and sympathetic murmurs. I stood beside Richard's casket, accepting condolences from people I barely recognized, while Elaine worked the crowd like a politician's wife. Kenneth stayed close to her side, his hand possessively at her waist, whispering in her ear between greetings. I watched them, these strangers who shared my blood and my home, and felt nothing but a cold, creeping dread. What were they planning? What did they think they knew? Back at the house after the service, relatives and friends gathered for the reception. I moved through the rooms like a ghost, barely tasting the food, hardly hearing the conversations around me. All I could think about was tomorrow, the will reading, the moment when everything would change. As the crowd thinned, I found myself cornered in the kitchen by Kenneth's brother, Scott. Unlike Kenneth's polished appearance, Scott had the weathered look of a man who worked with his hands. The black suit he wore seemed to constrain him, like he couldn't wait to get back to his jeans and work boots. Mrs. Harrington, he said quietly, glancing over his shoulder to make sure we were alone. I need to tell you something. What is it, Scott? He shifted uncomfortably. I overheard Kenneth on the phone last night. He was talking to someone about documents. said they were perfect and would stand up to any scrutiny. My blood ran cold. What kind of documents? I don't know for sure, but he mentioned your husband's signature. Said it was indistinguishable from the real thing. The room seemed to tilt sideways. Are you saying he forged my husband's signature? Scott wouldn't meet my eyes. I'm just telling you what I heard. Kenneth and I were not close. Haven't been since he married into money and decided the rest of us weren't good enough anymore. But this feels wrong. Real wrong. Before I could respond, the kitchen door swung open and Elaine walked in. She froze when she saw us, her eyes narrowing. Mother, people are asking for you, she said, her voice tight. Scott, I believe your wife was looking for you. Scott nodded to me and slipped past Elaine, who watched him go with undisguised suspicion. What did he want? She demanded once he was gone. Just to offer his condolences. I lied, surprised at how easily it came. Elaine didn't believe me. I could see it in her eyes, but she didn't press. The last guests are leaving. You should come say goodbye. I followed her back to the living room, my mind racing. Forged documents.
Richard's signature.
It all pointed to one horrifying possibility, a fake will. But how could they possibly think they'd get away with it? James had the original of the new will in his office safe. Unless they had somehow gotten to that one too. The thought was so alarming that I nearly missed my step, catching myself on the doorframe. If they had replaced both copies with forgeries, if they had somehow corrupted the legal process itself. I needed to talk to James.
Now.
I excused myself, claiming exhaustion, and retreated to my bedroom. Once the door was locked, I called James's cell phone. Martha? Is everything all right? He sounded concerned. James, I need to ask you something important. The copy of Richard's will in your office. How secure is it? There was a pause. It's in my personal safe. Only my senior partner and I have the combination. And when was the last time you checked it? Physically looked at it. Another pause, longer this time. Not since Richard signed it. Martha, what's going on? I told him about my conversation with Scott, about Kenneth's phone call, and the mention of forged signatures. That's deeply troubling, James said when I finished. I'll go to the office right now and check the will. Stay by your phone. The 30 minutes I waited for his call back were the longest of my life. I sat on the edge of my bed, still in my funeral clothes, staring at the wedding photo on my nightstand. Richard and I, so young, so hopeful. How had we raised a child who could do this? When the phone finally rang, I snatched it up. James? The will is here, he said, his voice tense. It looks authentic. Richard's signature. The witnesses, everything. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. So they didn't get to it. Maybe not. But Martha, something still doesn't add up. Why would they be so confident if they knew the real will leaves everything to you? Unless they plan to challenge it somehow? Claim Richard wasn't of sound mind. Possible, James admitted. But difficult to prove, especially with the medical examinations Richard underwent just before signing. He was very thorough. We were both silent for a moment, trying to piece together the puzzle. What if? I began slowly. What if they have another will? One dated after yours? That would supersede mine, James acknowledged. But Richard would have told me. We spoke weekly. He would have mentioned drafting a new will with another attorney. Unless he didn't draft it at all, I said, the terrible clarity of it washing over me. What if they created an entirely fake will with a later date and planned to discover it after tomorrow's reading? James's sharp intake of breath told me he understood the implications immediately. That would explain everything. Their confidence, the forged signatures Scott overheard, their attempt to get you to sign estate documents. What do we do? The reading proceeds as planned, James said firmly. But afterward, I'll need you to come back to my office alone. We need to prepare for the possibility that they'll produce this alleged new will. And Martha. Yes, be very careful tonight and tomorrow morning. If they're this desperate, there's no telling what they might do. After we hung up, I sat in the dark, turning the panic button over and over in my hand. The house was quiet now, the last guest gone. Somewhere down the hall, my daughter and her husband were plotting to steal my husband's legacy, to take everything he had worked for, to leave me with nothing. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, I felt something unexpected stirring in my chest. Not fear. Not even grief anymore. Anger.
Pure clarifying anger.
They thought I was weak. They thought I was broken. They had looked at my tears, my hunched shoulders, my trembling hands, and seen an easy target. A widow too consumed by loss to fight back. They were wrong. I changed out of my funeral clothes, washing away the day with cold water that shocked my system into alertness. Then I did something I hadn't done since Richard died. I opened my jewelry box and put on the diamond earrings he'd given me for our 40th anniversary. Battle armor. He'd called them jokingly when he'd presented them to me. For when you need to remember how strong you are. I needed to remember now. Tomorrow would come, with its revelations and confrontations. Tomorrow, I would face whatever scheme my daughter and her husband had concocted. Tomorrow, I would fight. But tonight, I had preparations of my own to make. I took out a pen and paper and began to write down everything I knew, everything I suspected, every strange comment and furtive glance I'd observed since Richard's death. When I finished, I sealed the pages in an envelope and hid it in the secret compartment of my jewelry box, the one Richard had built specially for my grandmother's pearls. Then I did something even more important. I took out my phone and recorded a video of myself, stating the date and time, describing the events of the past week, and my fears about what Elaine and Kenneth were planning. I detailed the contents of Richard's letter to me, James's confirmation of the new will, and Scott's warning about forged documents. When I finished, I sent the video to James's email with a simple message. Insurance. I was just putting my phone away when a soft knock came at my door. I froze, listening. The knock came again, followed by Elaine's voice.
Mother?
Are you awake? I need to talk to you. I hesitated, then crossed the door. But instead of opening it, I called through the wood. It's late, Elaine. Can it wait until morning? It's important, she insisted. About tomorrow's meeting with James. I took a deep breath, then opened the door just enough to see her face. She looked different. The cold calculation I'd grown accustomed to was gone, replaced by something that almost resembled the daughter I remembered. May I come in? She asked, her voice softening to match her expression. Every instinct warned against it, but I stepped back, allowing her into the room. She was my daughter, after all. Despite everything, some part of me still wanted to believe in her. Elaine perched on the edge of my reading chair, smoothing her silk robe over her knees. Mother, I owe you an apology. These past few days, Kenneth and I have been insensitive to your grief. Rushing things, taking charge without asking. It wasn't right. I said nothing, waiting. The truth is, she continued, not meeting my eyes, we've been worried about you. About how you'd manage everything on your own. Daddy handled all the finances, all the business matters. We just wanted to help ease the burden. By going through his safe, by trying to access his accounts before he was even buried. The words came out sharper than I intended. Elaine at least had the grace to look embarrassed. That was wrong. I see that now. She leaned forward, taking my hands in hers. But, Mother, you have to understand, Daddy talked to us about his plans. About how he wanted things handled when he was gone. Did he? My voice was steady, even as my heart raced.
Yes.
He told us he was leaving the business to Kenneth and me. That we would take care of you, of course, but that he trusted us to grow what he had built. The lie was so brazen, so complete, that for a moment I could only stare at her. This woman with my daughter's face, telling me with perfect sincerity that my husband had said the exact opposite of what he'd actually done. That's interesting, I said finally, because that's not what his will says. Something flashed in her eyes. Alarm. Quickly masked. Well, legal documents are complicated. James will explain everything tomorrow. She squeezed my hands. The important thing is that we're family. We'll get through this together. She stood to leave, then paused at the door. Oh, and Mother? Kenneth and I were thinking, After the reading tomorrow, why don't we all go out to dinner? To celebrate Daddy's life properly. Just the three of us. That sounds lovely, I lied, matching her false warmth with my own. After she left, I locked the door again and leaned against it, my heart pounding. The performance I'd just witnessed confirmed everything. They were planning something for tomorrow, something that would happen after the official reading. Something they expected would change everything. I picked up my phone again and texted James. They're definitely planning something for tomorrow after the reading. Elaine just gave an Oscar-worthy performance about how Richard told them the business would be theirs. His response came quickly. I've moved some appointments. We'll have time after the reading to prepare for whatever they're planning. Try to get some sleep. Sleep.
As if that were possible now.
I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, running through scenarios in my mind. What would happen tomorrow? How would they spring their trap? And most importantly, how could I possibly fight back against whatever they had planned? As dawn broke, I was still awake, watching the light change on the walls. In a few hours, I would face my daughter across a conference table and learn just how far she was willing to go to betray me. I was ready, or so I thought. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that Elaine and Kenneth had a plan far more devious than a forged will. A plan that would shake the foundations of everything I believed about my husband, my daughter, and myself. A plan that was about to explode in all our faces. The morning of the will reading dawned clear and cold, a perfect reflection of the clarity I now felt. Gone was the fog of grief that had clouded my judgment. In its place was a steely resolve I hadn't known I possessed. I dressed carefully. A black suit Richard had always admired, pearl earrings he'd given me on our 25th anniversary, and the wedding band I hadn't taken off in 43 years. Battle armor, all of it. When I came downstairs, Elaine and Kenneth were already in the kitchen, speaking in hushed tones that abruptly ceased when I entered. Kenneth was impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Elaine wore a black dress that managed to be both appropriately somber and fashionably flattering. "Good morning, Mother," she said, her voice honey-sweet. "Did you sleep well?" "Well enough," I replied, pouring myself coffee from the pot Kenneth had brewed. I noticed he'd used Richard's special reserve beans, the ones imported from some remote mountain region that cost $50 a pound. The ones reserved for special occasions. Today was certainly special, though not in the way they thought. "We should leave by 1:30, Kenneth said, checking his Rolex. "Traffic can be unpredictable downtown." "Actually," I said, taking a deliberate sip of the excellent coffee, "I've asked James to send a car for me. You two go ahead. I'll meet you there." The glance they exchanged was quick but revealing, alarm, followed by forced nonchalance. "That's not necessary, Mother," Elaine said. "We're happy to drive you. I prefer my own transportation." I kept my tone light but firm. "I have a few personal matters to discuss with James before the formal reading." Kenneth's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "What kind of personal matters?" I met his gaze steadily. "The kind that are personal, Kenneth." Another glance between them. Another silent conversation I wasn't meant to understand. "Well, if you insist," Elaine finally said, her tone suggesting I was being difficult for no reason. "But don't be late." James said 2 o'clock sharp. I nodded, finished my coffee, and retreated to Richard's study to make a phone call I didn't want them to overhear. "Martha?" James answered on the first ring. "Is everything all right?" "They're nervous," I said quietly, keeping an eye on the door. "I told them I'm arranging my own transportation to the reading." They didn't like that.
Good.
"The less time you spend alone with them, the better. I've sent Michael. He'll be there at 1 to pick you up." "Thank you. Have you found anything else?" James hesitated. "Nothing concrete. But my investigator did some preliminary digging into Kenneth's finances. There are some irregularities. Large withdrawals, unexplained transfers. He's either hiding money or spending it on something he doesn't want traced." "Or both," I murmured, remembering Richard's notebook entries about Kenneth's failed business ventures. "Possibly. We'll know more soon. Just stay vigilant, Martha. I'll see you at 1:30. I hung up and sat in Richard's chair, running my fingers over the worn leather armrests. What were they up to, Richard? I whispered. What did you discover that made you change everything? As if in answer, my gaze fell on the bookshelf behind his desk, specifically on a row of leather-bound ledgers labeled by year. Richard had kept meticulous records of all his business dealings, first by hand in these ledgers, then digitally in recent years. But he'd maintained the habit of printing important documents and storing them chronologically. I stood and pulled out the most recent volume, labeled simply 2024. Inside were monthly tabs, each containing printouts of emails, contracts, and financial statements Richard had deemed important enough to preserve. I flipped to the last complete month before his death. Most of the documents related to business as usual, vendor contracts, property management reports, investment summaries. But tucked between two ordinary bank statements was something odd, a private investigator's report. My hands trembled as I pulled it out. The report was dated just 2 weeks before Richard's death, addressed to him personally, and marked confidential. The subject line made my blood run cold. Surveillance report, Kenneth Harrington Davis and Associates. Richard had been having our son-in-law followed. I scanned the document quickly, my heart pounding. According to the investigator, Kenneth had been meeting regularly with a man named Victor Reyes, described as a known document forger with ties to several fraud operations. There were photographs, Kenneth and a thin, nervous-looking man huddled at a corner table in a dimly lit bar, Kenneth handing the man an envelope in a parking garage, the two emerging from an office building with Reyes printing and design on the door. But it was the final paragraph that made me gasp aloud. Subject was overheard discussing the creation of convincing documents, specifically mentioning a will and signature verification. Surveillance audio captured the phrase, "once the old man is gone," and references to making sure she gets nothing. Recommend immediate legal consultation and security measures. The old man, Richard, and she, me, they had been planning this before Richard died. They had been waiting for him to die. The thought was so horrifying, so incomprehensible, that for a moment I couldn't breathe. My own daughter had been waiting for her father to die so she could steal his fortune and leave me with nothing. And Richard had known. He'd discovered their plot and changed his will to protect me. But he hadn't confronted them.
Why?
Why let them continue to believe their plan would work? Unless he'd been gathering evidence, building a case, making sure they couldn't wiggle out of the consequences. I flipped frantically through the rest of the ledger, looking for more information. Near the back, I found a sealed envelope labeled simply insurance. Inside was a USB drive and a handwritten note in Richard's familiar scrawl. Martha, if you're reading this, something has happened to me before I could complete what needed to be done. Everything you need is on this drive, recordings, documents, proof. Take it to James immediately. And whatever you do, don't let them know what you found. All my love, Richard. I stared at the small device in my palm, my mind racing. What was on it? What had Richard discovered that was so damning he felt the need to hide it? I didn't have time to find out now. A glance at the clock showed it was nearly 12:30. Elaine and Kenneth would be leaving soon, and I needed to be ready when Michael arrived. I slipped the USB drive and the investigator's report into my purse, returned the ledger to its place, and left the study. As I passed the guest room, I could hear Elaine and Kenneth's voices behind the closed door. "Sure everything is in place?" Elaine was saying, her voice tense. "Positive." Carson confirmed it's all set. "Once the reading is done." Kenneth stopped abruptly as I deliberately let my heels click loudly on the hardwood floor, announcing my presence. The door opened a moment later, and Elaine emerged, her smile too bright. "Mother, we were just about to look for you. We should leave in about 20 minutes. "Actually, I've decided to go a bit earlier," I said smoothly. "My ride will be here shortly." Her smile faltered, but we agreed. "Plans change, dear. Don't worry, I'll see you at James's office." I turned and walked away before she could argue, feeling her eyes boring into my back. In my bedroom, I added a few more essentials to my purse, Richard's letter, the panic button Michael had given me, and a small framed photo of Richard and me from happier days. Then I sat by the window, watching the street, waiting for my escape. Michael arrived precisely at 1 o'clock, his nondescript sedan pulling smoothly into the driveway. I was out the door before he could ring the bell, moving with a purpose that belied my 65 years. "Mrs. Harrington," he nodded, opening the car door for me. "Thank you for coming, Michael. I have something important to show James." I patted my purse as I slid into the passenger seat. Michael's eyes narrowed slightly. He caught the significance immediately. "We'll get you there safely," he promised, scanning the surroundings before getting behind the wheel. As we pulled away, I saw the curtain in the guest room twitch. Elaine, watching me leave. I didn't wave. The drive to James's office took just under 20 minutes. Michael escorted me directly to a private conference room where James was waiting, his silver hair slightly disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it, a habit from our college days that emerged whenever he was deeply troubled. "Martha," he said, rising to greet me. "What have you found?" I pulled out the report and the USB drive, explaining where I discovered them and what they contained. James read the investigator's findings, his expression growing darker with each paragraph. "This is extremely serious," he said when he finished. "If they were planning this before Richard's death." He didn't need to complete the sentence. We both knew what it implied. "We need to see what's on this drive," I said, handing him the USB. James nodded and inserted it into his laptop. The screen lit up with a folder containing dozens of files, each meticulously labeled with dates and descriptions. Audio recording, KNE, discussing forgery. Email evidence, K to VRE, document creation. Financial records, K's hidden accounts. Richard had been thorough, more thorough than I could have imagined. He'd compiled a complete case against our daughter and son-in-law, documenting their plan to create a forged will, hide assets, and leave me destitute after his death. But the most damning file was simply labeled confession. James clicked on it, and Richard's voice filled the room, my Richard, speaking from beyond the grave. "This recording is dated March 15th, 2024. He began formally. I, Richard Harrington, am making this statement of my own free will and with full mental capacity. I have recently discovered that my daughter, Elaine Harrington Davis, and her husband, Kenneth Davis, have been plotting to alter my will and testament through forgery and fraud. Their intention, based on surveillance and recorded conversations, is to create a false will that disinherits my wife, Martha, and transfers all assets to themselves immediately upon my death. I have gathered substantial evidence of their plot, including recorded conversations, financial transactions to known document forgers, and drafts of the fraudulent documents themselves. All of this evidence has been compiled and will be delivered to my attorney, James Mercer, in the event of my death. I am not confronting Elaine and Kenneth at this time, as I wish to gather more conclusive evidence. However, I have changed my actual will to leave all assets to my wife, Martha, with Elaine to receive a trust only after Martha's passing, and only if she does not contest the will. If I should die before this matter is resolved, I want it known that I fear foul play may be involved. While I have a history of heart problems, I am currently in good health according to my most recent physical examination, dated February 28, 2024. This statement, along with all evidence gathered, should be turned over to the proper authorities if anything happens to me under suspicious circumstances. The recording ended, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Richard hadn't just suspected our daughter of planning to steal his fortune. He'd feared she might hasten his death to get it. "Martha," James said gently, placing his hand over mine. "I need to ask you something difficult. Did Richard show any unusual symptoms before his heart attack? Anything that seemed wrong?" I closed my eyes, forcing myself to remember those final days. "He was tired," I said slowly. "More than usual. And he complained about heartburn. I wanted him to see the doctor, but he said it was just stress." "And his medications? Did he take them regularly?" "Yes, every morning with breakfast." I watched him. My voice trailed off as a terrible thought struck me. Except the day he died. Elaine had come over early. She insisted on making breakfast while I showered. When I came down, Richard had already taken his pills. James and I stared at each other, the implication hanging in the air between us. Could Elaine have tampered with Richard's heart medication? The thought was so monstrous, so beyond comprehension, that I couldn't fully grasp it. "We need to involve the police," James said finally. "This goes far beyond inheritance fraud. If there's any possibility that Richard's death was hastened, we need a proper investigation." I nodded numbly. "But not yet. Not until after the reading. I want to see their faces when they realize their plan has failed." James looked like he wanted to argue, but checked his watch instead. "They'll be arriving soon. Are you sure you're up for this?"
Was I?
Could any mother be prepared to face the daughter she suspected of killing her father for money? "I have to be," I said simply. James nodded and closed his laptop, securing the USB drive in his desk drawer. "I've arranged for a security officer to be present during the reading, standard procedure for high-value estates. And Michael will remain nearby." "Thank you." We spent the remaining time reviewing what would happen during the reading. James explained that he would read the will exactly as written, making no mention of our suspicions or the evidence we discovered. The goal was to see how Elaine and Kenneth reacted when they learned they wouldn't be getting immediate control of Richard's fortune. "And if they produce their forged will?" I asked. "We let them," James said grimly. "The more evidence they provide of their fraud, the stronger the case against them." At precisely 2 o'clock, his assistant knocked on the door. "Mr. and Mrs. Davis have arrived, sir." James looked at me one last time. "Ready?" I straightened my shoulders, feeling the weight of Richard's wedding ring on my finger. "Ready." We moved to the main conference room, where Elaine and Kenneth were already seated. A stern-looking man in a dark suit, the security officer, I presumed, stood unobtrusively in the corner. "Mother," Elaine said, rising to kiss my cheek. I forced myself not to flinch at her touch. "We were worried when you left so early." "No need to worry," I said, taking a seat across from them. James and I had matters to discuss. Kenneth's eyes narrowed slightly. "What matters?" "Private ones," James interjected smoothly, arranging his papers. "Now, shall we begin? We're all here to witness the reading of Richard Harrington's last will and testament, dated February 20th, 2024, and properly witnessed and notarized." I saw Elaine and Kenneth exchange a quick glance at the date. Had their forged will been dated later? Earlier? I couldn't tell from their expressions. James began to read, his voice steady and formal. The standard legal preamble, the declarations of sound mind and body, the appointment of executors. And then, the part they were waiting for. "I hereby bequeath all my worldly possessions, assets, properties, and holdings, valued at approximately $50 million, to my beloved wife, Martha Elaine Harrington, to use and dispose of as she sees fit during her lifetime." The change in the atmosphere was immediate and electric. Elaine's face flushed deep red, while Kenneth went deathly pale. Their hands, clasped together on the table, tightened until their knuckles showed white. James continued reading, explaining the provision for Elaine after my death, and the no-contest clause that would disinherit her completely if she challenged the will. With each word, their expressions grew more strained, more disbelieving. When James finished, a heavy silence filled the room. I waited, watching my daughter, wondering what she would do, what she would say, how she would try to salvage her plan. It was Kenneth who broke first. "This can't be right," he said, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. "Richard discussed his intentions with us extensively. This doesn't reflect his wishes at all." James raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Davis, I assure you this is the legal and binding will of Richard Harrington, properly executed and witnessed." "It's a mistake," Elaine insisted, her voice rising. "Daddy would never do this. He always said the business would come to me, to us. Mother knows nothing about running a corporation." I met my daughter's gaze steadily. "Your father made his wishes very clear, Elaine. This is what he wanted." "No." She slammed her hand on the table. "This is wrong. This is your doing, isn't it? You manipulated him somehow." convinced him to change everything when he was sick and confused. That's a serious accusation, James said coldly. Richard was examined by 2 independent physicians before signing this will. Their affidavits confirming his mental competence are on file. Kenneth placed a restraining hand on Elaine's arm, his businessman's instincts clearly warning him they were venturing into dangerous territory. "What my wife means," he said, forcing a calmer tone, "is that this comes as a shock. Richard had discussed different arrangements with us. If you have documentation of those discussions, I'd be happy to review them," James offered, his tone neutral but his eyes watchful. Another loaded glance between them. Another silent conversation. "Actually," Kenneth said slowly, "we do have documentation. Richard gave us a copy of his will, a different will for safekeeping, dated March 5th. And there it was. The trap they thought they were springing on me." James frowned, the perfect picture of professional concern. "That's highly irregular. Richard never mentioned drafting a new will after February. It was a private matter," Elaine said quickly. "Between family." "I see. And you have this document with you?" Kenneth reached for his briefcase. "As a matter of fact, we do. We brought it as a precaution, in case there was any confusion." He withdrew a document that looked, from my vantage point, remarkably similar to the one James had just read. Same legal letterhead, same format. Only the content, and presumably the signatures, would be different. "May I?" James held out his hand. Kenneth hesitated, then passed the document across the table. "You'll see it's properly executed. 2 witnesses, notarized. Completely legal." James examined the document carefully, his expression giving nothing away. "This appears to be on our firm's letterhead," he observed. "Yet I have no record of this will being prepared by anyone at Mercer, Goldstein and Associates." "It was handled directly by Richard," Elaine said. "He said he wanted to keep it quiet until the right time." James nodded thoughtfully. "I see. And the witnesses?" He checked the signatures. "Barbara Collins and Victor Reyes? I don't believe I know either of them." At the mention of Reyes's name, I saw Kenneth's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. The forger. They'd used the forger as a witness on their fake will. "Friends of Richard's," Kenneth said smoothly. "Business associates." James made a show of examining the document more closely. "Well, this is certainly unexpected. If this will is authentic, it would indeed supersede the February document." Hope bloomed on their faces, premature, triumphant hope. "However," James continued, "given the irregular circumstances, I'll need to verify its authenticity before proceeding. Standard procedure, I'm sure you understand. I'll need to contact these witnesses, confirm the notary's credentials, examine the paper and ink." "How long will that take?" Elaine demanded. "A few days. Perhaps a week." James folded the document carefully. "In the meantime, the February will remains in effect. Mrs. Harrington retains control of all assets until this matter is resolved." Kenneth's carefully constructed calm began to crack. "That's unacceptable. Richard's intentions are clear in this document. It should be honored immediately." "I'm afraid that's not how it works, Mr. Davis," James said firmly. "When there are competing wills, proper authentication must occur before any distributions are made." "This is ridiculous," Elaine snapped, glaring at me. "Mother, you know Daddy wanted the business to come to us. You know he trusted us to take care of everything. Why are you letting this happen?" I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw a stranger. The little girl I'd raised, the child I'd loved with every fiber of my being, was gone. In her place was this cold, calculating woman who viewed me as nothing but an obstacle to her greed. "Your father trusted me," I said quietly. "For 43 years, he trusted me with his heart, his home, and his happiness. If you think I would betray that trust now, then you never knew either of us at all." Something ugly flashed across her face. "You pathetic old woman," she hissed, dropping all pretense. "You think you can run Daddy's empire? You think you can manage $50 million? You'll run everything into the ground within a year." "Elaine," Kenneth warned, but she was beyond caution now.
"No."
"I'm not going to sit here and watch her steal what should be ours. She turned back to me, her eyes burning with hatred. You were supposed to get the house and a monthly allowance. That's it. That's all you were ever supposed to get. The raw truth of her greed, laid bare at last, should have hurt more than it did. But I'd moved beyond pain now. All I felt was a strange, sad clarity. Is that what we're worth to you, Elaine? Your father and I? A house and an allowance? Don't play the victim, Mother. You never cared about the business. Never showed any interest in what Daddy built. Why should you control it now when you don't even understand it? Because that's what your father wanted, I said simply. And unlike you, I respected his wishes. Kenneth finally intervened, physically pulling Elaine back into her seat. This isn't productive, he said tersely. James, we insist on expedited verification of our will. Tomorrow, not next week. I'll do my best, James replied diplomatically. But these things take time to do properly. Meanwhile, I added, unable to resist twisting the knife just a little, I'll be meeting with Richard's executive team tomorrow morning. As the new owner of Harrington Enterprises, I think it's important I understand exactly what I've inherited. The look of pure panic that flashed across Kenneth's face was almost comical. You can't make any decisions about the company until this whole situation is resolved, he said quickly. Any changes you implement could damage operations irreparably. Oh, I don't plan to make changes yet, I assured him with a smile I didn't feel. I just want to understand exactly what my husband built, and exactly how it's been managed recently. Another flash of panic, more pronounced this time. Interesting. Was there something specific at the company they didn't want me to discover? James cleared his throat. If there's nothing else, I believe we're finished for today. I'll be in touch once the verification process begins. Kenneth practically dragged Elaine from the room, her face a mask of barely contained fury. The security officer followed them out, leaving James and me alone in the suddenly quiet conference room. Well, James said after a moment, that was illuminating. Very, I agreed. Did you notice Kenneth's reaction when I mentioned meeting with the executive team? I did. There's something at the company they don't want you to find. Something beyond the fake will, you mean? James nodded thoughtfully. Possibly. Richard's company is worth the bulk of his fortune, around 40 million of the 50. If they've been planning this for some time, they might have already started siphoning money, I finished for him, or making arrangements that benefit them at the company's expense. Exactly. I think your meeting tomorrow is an excellent idea. But Martha, he added, his expression grave, you shouldn't go alone. Not after what we've learned today. I thought of Richard's recorded fear that his death might not have been natural. Of Elaine's fury when she realized her plan had failed. Of the cold calculation in Kenneth's eyes. I'll take Michael with me, I promised. And James, what about the police? The evidence on the USB drive, the forged will they just try to pass off? Isn't that enough to involve them now? James hesitated. It's certainly enough to open an investigation into the fraud. But as for Richard's death, that's more complicated. Without an autopsy, proving his medication was tampered with would be nearly impossible. So they get away with it? With all of it? The injustice burned in my throat. Not necessarily. Financial crimes leave trails. If they were embezzling from the company, if they paid Reyes for forgery services, if they've hidden assets, those things can be proven. And they carry significant penalties. It wasn't the justice Richard deserved, but it was something. Something I could fight for. What do we do next? I asked. We let them believe we're still verifying their forged will. Meanwhile, we gather more evidence, and I prepare the paperwork for the police. James squeezed my hand reassuringly. They won't get away with this, Martha. I promise you that. When I left James's office, Michael was waiting to drive me home. The house, my house now, legally and unquestionably, felt different when I returned. Larger, emptier, but somehow less oppressive. Perhaps because I knew Elaine and Kenneth wouldn't be returning. They had texted while I was on my way home, staying at the Four Seasons tonight. We'll discuss next steps tomorrow. No mention of their outburst, no apology for their behavior. just the assumption that there would be next steps in their plan to take what was mine. Let them think that. Let them believe they still had a chance. The longer they maintained that illusion, the more evidence they would provide against themselves. I made myself a simple dinner and ate it in Richard's study, surrounded by his books, his papers, the accumulated wisdom of his life. For the first time since his death, I felt close to him again. Not in the painful way of fresh grief, but in the comforting way of shared purpose. "I'll finish what you started," I promised his empty chair. "I'll make sure they pay for what they've done." After dinner, I spent hours going through Richard's files, learning all I could about his business, preparing for tomorrow's meeting. Around midnight, exhausted but determined, I finally went to bed. The next morning, I woke to a text from an unknown number. "This isn't over. You have no idea what you're up against. Take the house and a reasonable allowance, or things will get very ugly very fast." I stared at the message, recognizing Kenneth's threatening style even without his name attached. So this was their new approach, intimidation. I forwarded the message to James with a simple note. More evidence for the file. Then I dressed for battle once again, a navy suit this time, with a silk scarf Richard had brought me from Milan and the sapphire earrings that matched my eyes. I wasn't just a grieving widow anymore. I was the owner of a $50 million empire, and it was time I looked the part. Michael arrived promptly at 8:30 to drive me to Harrington Enterprises headquarters. The gleaming 20-story building in the heart of downtown had always intimidated me a little. Richard had built it from nothing, turning a small manufacturing business into a diversified corporation with interests in real estate, technology, and finance. I'd visited, of course, attended company parties, charity galas, the occasional lunch with Richard. But I'd always felt like a guest, not an owner. Today would be different. The executive floor was hushed and elegant, all polished wood and soft lighting. Richard's longtime assistant, Caroline, met me at the elevator, her professional composure slipping just enough to show genuine grief in her eyes. "Mrs. Harrington," she said warmly, taking both my hands in hers. "It's good to see you. We've all been so worried." "Thank you, Caroline. It's been difficult." She nodded understanding. "The executive team is waiting in the conference room. Can I get you anything before you join them?" "Just a moment to catch my breath," I said, suddenly nervous. These were Richard's top people, brilliant, ambitious executives who had helped him build his empire. What would they think of me, the homemaker suddenly thrust into ownership? Caroline seemed to read my thoughts. "They respected Mr. Harrington enormously," she said gently. "And they know how much he valued your opinion. You may not have been in the boardroom, but he brought your wisdom to every major decision." Her words steadied me. "Thank you, Caroline. I'm ready now." The conference room fell silent as I entered, 5 pairs of eyes turning to assess me. I recognized them all from company functions. Harrison Wells, the silver-haired CFO, Mei Lin, the razor-sharp head of legal, Thomas Granger, who ran the technology division, Sophia Rodriguez, the real estate maven, and Jonathan Pierce, Richard's second-in-command and COO. It was Jonathan who spoke first, rising to greet me. "Mrs. Harrington, on behalf of everyone at Harrington Enterprises, please accept our deepest condolences."
Thank you, Jonathan.
"And please call me Martha. I think we can dispense with formalities under the circumstances." He nodded, gesturing to a seat at the head of the table, Richard's seat. I hesitated only briefly before taking it. "I appreciate you all meeting with me on such short notice," I began, summoning the strength I'd found in the past days. "As you may know, Richards has left me in control of all his assets, including this company." I saw a flicker of something, surprise, relief, pass between several of them. "We were informed of the succession plan, yes," Jonathan confirmed, "though there seemed to be competing claims. So they knew about Elaine and Kenneth's challenge. Interesting. The will my daughter and her husband produced is a forgery," I said bluntly, deciding directness was the best approach. "My attorney is handling that matter. What concerns me now is understanding the state of the company Richard built and that I now own." Harrison Wells, the CFO, cleared his throat. "Mrs. Martha, We've prepared a complete overview of the company's current financial position. But before we get into those details, there's something the executive team feels you should know. I brace myself. Go on. For the past year, we've been concerned about certain irregularities. Contracts with unusual terms. Investments that didn't align with our normal strategies. Personnel changes that seemed poorly considered. All pushed by Kenneth Davis, Sophia Rodriguez added, her tone making it clear what she thought of my son-in-law. Kenneth has no official position with this company, I said, confused. Jonathan exchanged glances with the others before responding. Not officially, no. But Richard had been, giving him more influence, allowing him to sit in on key meetings, review sensitive documents, even make recommendations on strategic decisions. We assumed it was because he was family, Thomas Granger added, that Richard was grooming him for eventual leadership. But some of us had concerns, Maylin said, her precise voice carrying the weight of understatement, particularly about the Westlake development project. Westlake. The name was vaguely familiar. That's the new commercial complex Richard was considering, correct? Harrison nodded. $100 million project. Potentially very profitable, but also high risk. Kenneth was pushing hard for us to commit fully, immediately, with Harrington Enterprises as the primary investor, which would have tied up nearly 30% of our liquid capital, Sophia explained, in a project developed by Carson Holdings. The name triggered a memory, Kenneth's conversation with Elaine that I'd overheard. Carson confirmed it's all set. And who owns Carson Holdings? I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. On paper, a businessman named James Carson, May said. But our legal team's due diligence found that 20% of the company is owned by a shell corporation called KD Ventures. Kenneth Elaine Davis, I murmured, the pieces falling into place. Jonathan nodded grimly. We brought our concerns to Richard about 3 months ago. He seemed shocked, asked us to continue the due diligence quietly and not confront Kenneth directly. Which is why we were surprised when he suddenly fell ill, Harrison added. He'd been in excellent health at our last meeting, just 2 days before his heart attack. The implication hung heavy in the air. They hadn't just suspected Kenneth of financial impropriety. They'd connected the dots to Richard's unexpected death. Richard left me a USB drive, I said quietly. Evidence he'd been gathering about Kenneth and Elaine, about their plan to forge his will and take control of the company. 5 pairs of eyes widened in understanding. If they had succeeded, Sophia began. The Westlake deal would have been pushed through immediately, Harrison finished for her. $30 million of company money flowing into a project partially owned by Kenneth himself. And that's just what we know about, Thomas added darkly. There could be other schemes we haven't uncovered yet. I took a deep breath, steadying myself against the magnitude of what I was learning. My daughter and her husband hadn't just wanted Richard's personal fortune. They'd been positioning themselves to loot his company as well. I need to see everything, I said firmly. Every document, every email, every contract Kenneth had any involvement with. And I need to understand exactly how the Westlake deal was structured. For the next 3 hours, the executive team walked me through the intricate web Kenneth had been weaving. The complex financial maneuvers, the carefully hidden conflicts of interest, the slow consolidation of influence within key departments. By lunchtime, my head was spinning with new information, but one thing was crystal clear. Kenneth Davis had been systematically preparing to hollow out Harrington Enterprises for his personal gain. And my daughter had been his willing accomplice. What do you want to do, Martha? Jonathan asked as our meeting wound down. The Westlake contracts are scheduled for final review next week. Kenneth was insistent they couldn't be delayed. I thought for a moment, then made my first executive decision as owner of Harrington Enterprises. Cancel the review, indefinitely, and revoke Kenneth's access to all company information, effective immediately. Maylin smiled slightly. With pleasure. And one more thing, I added, an idea forming. I want a complete audit of all company activities for the past year. Every transaction, every decision Kenneth influenced. And I want it done quickly and quietly. Harrison nodded approvingly. I can have our independent auditors start tomorrow. It will take a few weeks to be thorough. Perfect, I said, feeling a plan take shape. In the meantime, let's proceed as if nothing has changed. If Kenneth contacts any of you, be polite but non-committal. Tell him you're waiting for the will situation to be resolved before making any major decisions. You want them to think they still have a chance, Jonathan observed, a hint of admiration in his voice. Keep them from doing anything desperate while you build your case. Exactly. As the meeting broke up, Mei Lin held back, waiting until the others had left before approaching me. Mrs. Harrington, she said quietly, there's something else you should know. Something I didn't want to discuss in front of the others until I was certain of your position. What is it? 3 weeks ago, Richard asked me to quietly investigate the possibility of criminal charges against Kenneth and Elaine. Not just for the financial improprieties, but for other matters. My heart skipped a beat. What other matters?
He didn't specify.
But he was very interested in the legal standard for proving medical tampering, and in whether financial motives could establish intent in a homicide case. The room seemed to tilt around me. Richard hadn't just suspected. He'd been preparing to accuse our daughter of murder. Did he share any evidence with you? I asked when I could trust my voice again.
No.
He said he was still gathering what he needed, that he would bring it to me when he was ready. She hesitated, and then he died. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from James. Urgent. Call me immediately. I excused myself and stepped into Richard's, my private office to make the call. James? What's happening? His voice was tight with tension. The police just called. There was a break-in at my office last night. The safe in my private office was targeted specifically. My blood ran cold. The USB drive is secure. I took it home with me, thank God. But Martha, they knew exactly what they were looking for. This wasn't a random burglary. Kenneth and Elaine, I said, certain beyond doubt. Almost certainly. The police are investigating, but I wanted to warn you. If they're willing to commit burglary to destroy evidence, they might be willing to do worse. I finished for him. James, I've learned something disturbing. Richard was investigating the possibility of bringing criminal charges against them, not just for fraud, but for his murder. Silence on the line as James absorbed this. Then, Martha, you need protection. Real protection, not just Michael. I'm calling the police right now to request a patrol at your house. I'm not going home, I decided suddenly. Not yet. I'm going to stay at the Four Seasons tonight. The same hotel where Kenneth and Elaine are staying?
Exactly.
The last place they'd expect me to be. And the perfect place to confront them with what I've learned. Martha, that's incredibly dangerous. These people may have killed Richard. They could. They won't try anything in a public place, I interrupted. And I won't be alone. I'll have Michael with me. Plus, the hotel has security cameras everywhere. At least wait until the police have been briefed. I'm meeting with a detective this afternoon to turn over the USB drive and the forged will.
Fine, y conceded.
I'll wait for your call. But James, I'm done hiding. I'm done being the grieving widow they can push aside. It's time they learned exactly who they're dealing with. After hanging up, I sat in Richard's leather chair, surrounded by the trappings of the empire he had built, the empire our daughter had been willing to kill for. The magnitude of her betrayal was almost incomprehensible. Not just greed, not just impatience, but cold-blooded calculation. Caroline knocked softly on the door. Mrs. Harrington, there's a call for you on line 1. It's your daughter. I took a deep breath, centering myself.
Thank you, Caroline.
I'll take it. I picked up the receiver, pressing the blinking button. Hello, Elaine. Mother. Her voice was cool, controlled, so different from her furious outburst yesterday. We need to talk. Privately. No lawyers, no executives. Just family.
I'm listening.
Not over the phone. Meet us for dinner tonight. The restaurant at the Four Seasons, 7 o'clock. I almost laughed at the coincidence. And why would I do that, Elaine? After what happened yesterday? Because we're still family, she said, her voice suddenly softer, more like the daughter I remembered. And because regardless of what you think, we want what's best for you. For all of us. I knew it was manipulation. I knew she was lying. And yet, some foolish part of me still wanted to believe there was a way back from this abyss. Some explanation that would make sense of the senseless, some path to reconciliation. All right, I agreed. 7 o'clock. But I'm bringing Michael. Who's Michael? My security consultant. A pause, then a forced laugh. Mother, you don't need security to have dinner with your own daughter. After yesterday, I think I do. Those are my terms, Elaine. Take them or leave them. Another pause.
Fine.
7 o'clock. With your consultant. She hung up without saying goodbye. I replaced the receiver, my hand trembling slightly. Dinner with the people who might have murdered my husband. The people who had certainly planned to steal everything he'd built. The people I had once loved more than life itself. What would I say to them? What could anyone say in the face of such betrayal? As if in answer, my gaze fell on a framed photo on Richard's desk, the three of us at Elaine's college graduation. Richard beaming with pride, his arm around my waist. Me smiling at the camera, wearing the sapphire earrings I had on today. And Elaine between us, young and beautiful and untainted by the greed that would later consume her. I picked up the frame, running my finger over her smiling face. My little girl, my only child, the baby I had nursed through fevers, the toddler whose scraped knees I had bandaged, the teenager whose broken heart I had mended. When had I lost her? When had money become more important than love, more valuable than family? And was there any chance at all, that somewhere beneath the cold, calculating woman she had become, some trace of that smiling girl remained? I would find out tonight, one way or another. I spent the rest of the afternoon preparing for my confrontation with Elaine and Kenneth. James called to inform me that he had turned over copies of the evidence to Detective Marcus Rivera of the Financial Crimes Unit. The detective wanted to meet with me tomorrow to discuss the case. What did he say about the possibility of foul play in Richard's death? I asked hesitantly. James sighed. He's taking it seriously, Martha. The evidence of their financial schemes combined with the timing of Richard's death is enough to warrant investigation. They've requested Richard's medical records and are consulting with specialists about the possibility of his heart medication being tampered with. Will they exhume his body? The question nearly choked me, the thought of Richard's rest being disturbed almost too much to bear. They're considering it, James said gently. But they want to review the medical evidence first. The good news is that they're taking immediate action on the fraud charges. They're preparing warrants for Kenneth and Elaine's financial records and for Reyes's business. So they'll be arrested soon? Not immediately. The detective wants to build the strongest case possible before making arrests. But it's coming, Martha. They won't escape justice. After our call, I had Caroline arrange for a hotel room at the Four Seasons, ironically on a different floor from where Elaine and Kenneth were staying. The coincidence of them suggesting the very hotel I had independently planned to stay at still amused me in a grim way. Michael picked me up at 5:30, his face registering surprise when he saw the small overnight bag I carried. Change of plans, I explained. I'm staying at the hotel tonight. I don't feel safe at the house anymore. He nodded, understanding immediately. Good decision, Mrs. Harrington. Your safety is the priority. On the drive to the hotel, I filled him in on the dinner meeting and my conversation with James. Michael listened intently, his expression growing more serious with each detail. I don't like this dinner plan, he said finally. Meeting them in a public place is one thing, but they're clearly desperate. Desperate people make dangerous choices. That's why you'll be with me, I reminded him. And why we're meeting in a crowded restaurant with security cameras. Still, we need to take precautions. I'll secure a table with good sight lines and a clear path to the exits. And Mrs. Harrington, Martha, please. He nodded. Martha, I recommend you not eat or drink anything that doesn't come directly from the server. And nothing that arrives after they do. The implication sent a chill down my spine. You think they might try to drug me? I think people who would forge documents and possibly tamper with heart medication are capable of anything. Better safe than sorry. He was right, of course. The daughter I once knew would never have drugged her mother. But that daughter was long gone, replaced by a stranger who saw me only as an obstacle to her ambitions. At the Four Seasons, Michael checked me in while I waited in the car, then escorted me through a side entrance to avoid the main lobby where we might encounter Elaine or Kenneth. My room was on the 18th floor, a spacious suite with a view of the city skyline that Richard would have appreciated. I showered and changed for dinner, choosing a deep burgundy dress that Richard had always loved, simple pearl jewelry, and low heels that I could move quickly in if necessary. Practical considerations, I never imagined having to make for dinner with my own daughter. At 6:45, Michael escorted me to the elevator. "I've spoken with hotel security," he informed me. "They're aware of the situation in general terms. If anything happens, signal me, and I'll have backup within seconds." The restaurant was everything you'd expect from a luxury hotel. Subdued lighting, elegant decor, quiet conversation blending with the soft notes of a piano in the corner. Michael spoke briefly to the maitre d', who led us to a table with an excellent view of both the entrance and the kitchen doors. As promised, we had a clear path to the exits. I ordered sparkling water while we waited, my stomach too knotted for anything stronger. At precisely 7 o'clock, Elaine and Kenneth arrived. My daughter looked beautiful, as always, her blonde hair expertly styled, her black dress expensive but understated, her makeup flawless. Kenneth was equally polished in a tailored suit, his silver tie perfectly coordinated with Elaine's subtle accessories. They looked like success personified. The perfect power couple. No one watching them cross the restaurant would ever suspect the ugliness that lay beneath that glossy exterior. "Mother." Elaine smiled as they reached our table, leaning down to kiss my cheek. I forced myself not to recoil. "You look well." "Thank you," I replied, not returning the compliment. "This is Michael." Kenneth eyed him with poorly disguised hostility. "Your security consultant. Seems excessive for a family dinner." Michael didn't offer his hand. "Mrs. Harrington's safety is my priority, Mr. Davis." "Safety." Elaine laughed, the sound brittle. "From what?" "Us." "Really, Mother, this is absurd." "Is it?" I asked quietly. "After everything that's happened?" An uncomfortable silence fell as they took their seats. Kenneth ordered scotch, neat. Elaine asked for a martini, extra dry. I kept my sparkling water, remembering Michael's warning. "So," Kenneth said after their drinks arrived, "let's get to the point. This whole situation has gotten out of hand. We need to find a reasonable compromise." "A compromise," I repeated. "Between my husband's genuine will and your forgery?" Elaine's eyes narrowed. "Mother, that's a serious accusation." "It's not an accusation, Elaine. It's a fact. We know the will you presented is a forgery. We know you paid Victor Reyes to create it." Kenneth's confident facade slipped for just a moment, his eyes darting to Elaine before he recovered. "That's ridiculous. We don't even know anyone named Reyes." "Really? That's strange, because he was one of the witnesses on your forged will. And there are photographs of you meeting with him multiple times over the past months." Elaine set her martini down with a sharp click. "If you called us here just to make wild accusations." "They're not wild, and they're not just accusations," I interrupted. "The police have the evidence, Elaine. All of it. The surveillance photos. The USB drive your father left documenting your scheme. The financial records showing payments to Reyes." The color drained from Kenneth's face. "What police?"
What are you talking about?
"Detective Rivera, Financial Crimes Unit. James met with him this afternoon." I leaned forward slightly. "They're preparing warrants as we speak. For your financial records. For Reyes's business. For everything." Elaine's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her glass, but her voice remained steady. "This is a misunderstanding. Whatever evidence you think you have." "Also explains the break-in at James's office last night," I continued as if she hadn't spoken. "The one where someone specifically targeted his safe. Looking for the USB drive, I assume." Kenneth's knuckles whitened around his scotch glass. We had nothing to do with any break-in. No? Then who knew James had evidence against you? Who else would benefit from destroying it? Another uncomfortable silence. Kenneth drained his scotch and signaled for another. Mother, Elaine said finally, her voice softening to the tone she'd used when asking for favors as a teenager. I think we've gotten off on the wrong foot here. We all want the same thing, to honor Daddy's legacy, to preserve what he built. Is that what you want? I asked, because the Westlake deal suggests otherwise. Kenneth froze with his fresh scotch halfway to his lips. What about Westlake? $30 million of company money flowing into a project partially owned by KED Ventures. That's you, Kenneth. Kenneth Elaine Davis. Did you really think no one would notice the connection? That's a legitimate business arrangement, he stammered. Richard approved it. No, he didn't. In fact, when the executive team brought their concerns to him, he began investigating you. Both of you. Elaine's composure was cracking. Mother, whatever you think you know. I know everything, Elaine. My voice hardened. I know about the forged will. I know about Westlake. I know about the other schemes you were planning once you had control of the company. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the most difficult accusation. And I know you were investigating ways to tamper with your father's heart medication. Kenneth's glass slipped from his fingers, spilling scotch across the white tablecloth. A server rushed over with napkins, creating a momentary distraction. When he left, Elaine was staring at me, her face a mask of genuine shock. That's insane, she whispered. You think I. The police are reviewing your father's medical records, I continued, watching their reactions carefully. They're consulting with specialists, and they're considering exhuming his body for a proper autopsy. Kenneth was sweating now, dark patches forming under the arms of his expensive suit. This is a witch hunt. You can't possibly believe. What I believe, I said quietly, is that you both were desperate for Richard's money. Desperate enough to forge his will. Desperate enough to embezzle from his company. And yes, desperate enough to make sure his heart failed before he could expose you. Elaine stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I won't sit here and listen to this. My own mother, accusing me of murdering my father. It's sick. Sit down, Elaine, I said, my voice low but commanding. We're not finished. I think we are. She grabbed her purse. Come on, Kenneth. We're leaving. Kenneth hesitated, looking at me with something like calculation in his eyes. What is it you want, Martha? Money? Is that it? Name your price to make this all go away. The sheer audacity of it almost made me laugh. My price? You think I can be bought off? That I would take money to ignore the fact that you killed my husband? No one killed anyone, he hissed, leaning across the table. Richard had a heart condition. He died naturally. Everything else is just your grief talking. Then you have nothing to worry about. I replied calmly. The investigation will clear you. The financial fraud charges, though, those might be harder to explain away. Fraud charges, he scoffed. Based on what? A fake USB drive? Documents you could have created yourself? It's your word against ours, Martha. And we're Richard's flesh and blood. You're right about one thing, I said, rising to face them both. It is about blood. The blood that ran through Richard's veins, the blood you tainted with whatever you put in his medication. The blood that connects me to the daughter I thought I knew. The daughter who apparently died somewhere along the way, replaced by a stranger who values money more than family. Elaine flinched as if I'd slapped her. For just a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of something, regret? Shame? In her eyes. But it vanished as quickly as it had appeared. We're done here, she said coldly. Our lawyers will be in touch. And Mother? I'd be careful with these accusations if I were you. Slander is a serious offense. They turned to leave, Kenneth throwing cash on the table for their drinks. But I wasn't finished. Elaine, I called after her. She paused but didn't turn around. Your father knew. Before he died, he knew everything. He was gathering evidence against you. He was preparing to cut you off completely. Now she did turn, her face pale. "You're lying. Ask Kenneth about the private investigator your father hired. Ask him about the surveillance photos. Ask him what your father discovered in those final weeks." Kenneth grabbed Elaine's arm. "Don't listen to her. She's trying to turn you against me." But doubt had crept into Elaine's expression. "Kenneth? What is she talking about?" "Nothing. It's nothing. Let's go." He practically dragged her from the restaurant, leaving me standing alone at the table, watching my daughter disappear once again, this time, perhaps for good. Michael moved to my side. "Are you all right?" I nodded, though in truth I felt hollow. I think I planted some seeds of doubt. Elaine didn't know about the private investigator. She didn't know her father had discovered their scheme before he died. "You think she'll turn on Kenneth?" "I don't know. But right now, he's the only ally she has. If she starts to doubt him..." Michael nodded, understanding. "Divide and conquer. Smart strategy." "Not strategy," I corrected him quietly. "Last hope. That's my daughter, Michael. Despite everything, despite what she's done, she's still my child." He looked at me with something like compassion. "Mrs. Harrington, Martha. In my line of work, I've seen a lot of family betrayals. And I've learned that sometimes the people we love aren't who we thought they were. Sometimes they never were." His words cut deep, but I couldn't deny their truth. Had I ever really known Elaine? Or had I seen only what I wanted to see? The perfect daughter, the loving child, the worthy heir to Richard's legacy? "Let's go upstairs," I said finally. "I need to call James and tell him what happened." In my suite, I recounted the dinner confrontation to James, who listened with growing concern. "They're panicking," he said when I finished. "Kenneth especially. That makes them dangerous, Martha. I'm glad you're not going home tonight." What happens next? Detective Rivera is moving quickly. He's requested an expedited warrant for their financial records. Once that comes through, things will move fast. In the meantime, stay at the hotel. Don't go anywhere alone. And Martha, don't try to confront them again. Let the police handle it from here. I agreed, though part of me wanted one more chance to reach Elaine, to find some remnant of the daughter I'd raised, some flicker of the girl who had once loved me. After hanging up, I stood at the window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Elaine and Kenneth were plotting their next move. Would they run? Fight? Turn on each other? My phone buzzed with a text. "Unknown number. We need to talk. Alone. Meet me in the hotel garden in 30 minutes. No security this time. Come alone or I don't show." My heart raced. Elaine wanted to meet. Alone. Was it a trap? Or was she finally ready to talk honestly, without Kenneth's influence? I called Michael immediately. "Absolutely not," he said when I showed him the text. "It's too dangerous." But what if she's ready to tell the truth? What if this is my only chance to reach her? Then she can come up to your suite, where I can ensure your safety. I shook my head. She won't. She specifically said alone. "Martha, think about what you're saying. These people may have murdered your husband. They've committed multiple felonies. They're cornered and desperate. Meeting Elaine alone is asking for trouble." He was right, of course. The rational part of me knew that. But the mother in me, the woman who had held Elaine as a newborn, who had taught her to ride a bike, who had watched her graduate from college, that part couldn't give up so easily. "What if we compromise?" I suggested. "I meet her in the garden, but you and hotel security watch from a distance. Close enough to intervene if necessary, but far enough that she feels we're speaking privately." Michael considered, then reluctantly nodded. "I'll arrange it. But Martha, promise me you'll stay in public view at all times. And if anything feels wrong, anything at all, you'll signal me immediately." "I promise." He left to coordinate with hotel security while I changed into something warmer for the garden meeting. As I pulled a sweater from my overnight bag, my fingers brushed against something hard, Richard's small leather notebook, the one I'd found in his desk that first day. I'd brought it without consciously planning to, as if some part of me knew I would need his wisdom tonight. I flipped it open, scanning the pages for any mention of Elaine separate from Kenneth. There, dated just 3 weeks before his death. Spoke with E alone today. She seems troubled. Asked leading questions about succession planning. Mentioned Kay's new investment strategy repeatedly. Is she being pressured, or is she equally involved? Need to determine before taking action. Richard had wondered the same thing I was wondering now, whether Elaine was a willing participant or somehow under Kenneth's influence. Whether there was still hope for the daughter we had raised. At 11:30, Michael escorted me to the hotel garden. Despite the late hour, the space was beautifully lit with subtle landscape lighting, creating pools of soft illumination among the shadows. A few other guests wandered the paths or sat on benches, enjoying the mild night air. I've positioned security here, and here, Michael said quietly, indicating different points around the garden. They're plain clothes, so Elaine won't notice them. I'll be at that table near the entrance, close enough to reach you in seconds if needed. Thank you, Michael. Remember your promise. Anything feels off, you signal me immediately. Just touch your ear like you're adjusting your earring. I nodded, then moved to a bench near the central fountain, deliberately choosing a spot with good lighting and visibility from multiple angles. At precisely midnight, Elaine appeared at the garden entrance. She had changed from her dinner outfit into something more casual, jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Without her usual perfect makeup and styled hair, she looked younger, more vulnerable, more like the daughter I remembered. She scanned the garden, her eyes passing over Michael without recognition, then spotted me by the fountain. Her steps were hesitant as she approached, none of her usual confidence evident in her bearing. Mother, she said softly, stopping a few feet away.
Elaine.
I wasn't sure you'd come. She glanced around nervously. Is he here? Your security man? Michael respects my privacy, I replied, not exactly lying. This conversation is between us. She seemed to accept this, sitting beside me on the bench, but maintaining her distance. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The fountain's gentle splashing filled the silence between us. We said at dinner, she finally began, her voice barely above a whisper. About Daddy hiring a private investigator. About him knowing what Kenneth was planning. Is that true? Yes, I said simply. He left evidence.
Recording, document, surveillance photo.
He knew everything, Elaine. She looked down at her hands, twisting them in her lap. When did he find out? A few months ago. He started suspecting something was wrong with the Westlake deal. The executive team brought their concerns to him, and he began investigating privately. And he changed his will because of what he found.
Yes.
To protect me. To protect the company he built. She was quiet again, still staring at her hands. I never wanted to hurt him, she said finally. You have to believe that. What did you want, Elaine? Help me understand how we got here. How my daughter became someone I don't recognize. She looked up then, her eyes shining with unshed tears. It started small. Kenneth had business ideas.
Good ones, he said.
But he needed capital. Daddy wouldn't invest, said Kenneth needed to prove himself first. It made Kenneth so angry. So, you decided to take what your father wouldn't give freely? Not at first. First, we just borrowed. Small amounts from my trust fund. Investments that were supposed to pay off quickly. But they didn't. We lost money, a lot of money. Kenneth said we needed to think bigger. That the only way out was a major infusion of capital. Westlake. She nodded. It was Kenneth's idea. Create a development company. Get Daddy's corporation to invest in it. Skim off the excess. He said everyone did it, that it was just smart business. And the forged will? Was that smart business too? Elaine at least had the grace to look ashamed. Kenneth found out somehow that Daddy was investigating us. He panicked. Said we needed to be ready when the time came. That we needed to make sure we had control. Did you know he was meeting with Reyes? That he was planning to forge your father's will? I knew something was happening. Kenneth didn't share all the details. Said it was better if I didn't know too much. Plausible deniability, he called it. I studied my daughter's face, trying to separate truth from manipulation. And Richard's death? Did you know about that too? Her head snapped up, genuine horror in her expression.
No.
Mother, how can you even think? I would never, she broke off, choking on the words. But Kenneth would, I pressed. Wouldn't he? She looked away, and in that moment of avoidance, I saw the truth. She hadn't actively participated in whatever happened to Richard, but she had suspected, had perhaps even seen signs, clues that something wasn't right, and she had chosen to ignore them. Elaine, I said gently, the police are investigating. They'll find the truth, with or without your help. But if you cooperate now, if you tell them what you know about Kenneth's activities. You want me to betray my husband? Her voice hardened slightly. I want you to save yourself. And I want justice for your father. She stood abruptly, pacing in front of the bench. You don't understand what you're asking. Kenneth isn't just my husband. He controls everything. Our money, our home, our lives. I can't just walk away. You can. I'll help you. She laughed bitterly. Help me? After everything that's happened? Why would you do that? Because you're my daughter, I said simply. Because despite everything, I love you. And because I think there's still a chance for you to make this right. Something in her expression shifted, a softening, a moment of vulnerability. For just a second, I glimpsed the daughter I remembered, the girl who had once valued love over money, family over ambition. I need time to think, she said finally, to figure out what to do. There isn't much time, Elaine. The police are moving quickly. Once they have the warrants. I know. She ran a hand through her hair, a gesture so reminiscent of Richard that it made my heart ache. Just give me until tomorrow. Please. I wanted to push harder, to demand answers now, to make her see that Kenneth was dragging her down with him. But I recognized the fragility of this moment. Push too hard, and I'd lose her completely. Until tomorrow, I agreed. But Elaine, be careful. If Kenneth suspects you're thinking of turning on him, I know how to handle Kenneth, she said, a hardness entering her voice that I'd never heard before. I've been doing it for years. She turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. The police. What do they know about Daddy's death? Do they have actual evidence of tampering? They're reviewing his medical records, consulting with specialists, looking for any irregularities in his treatment or symptoms. She nodded, absorbing this. And if they find something, if they can prove someone tampered with his medication, then whoever did it will face murder charges. Our eyes met, and a silent understanding passed between us. She knew, even if she couldn't admit it aloud. She knew what Kenneth had done. Tomorrow, she said again, then walked quickly away, disappearing into the hotel. Michael was at my side moments later. Everything okay? I'm not sure, I admitted. She's scared, conflicted. I think she might be ready to turn on Kenneth, but she's afraid. Did she admit to anything specific? Not in so many words. But she knows Michael. She knows what Kenneth did to Richard. She may not have actively participated, but she knows. Back in my suite, I called James despite the late hour, needing his advice. He answered on the third ring, his voice groggy with sleep. Martha? What's happened? I filled him in on my meeting with Elaine, her reluctance to fully implicate Kenneth, and my sense that she was wavering. This could be significant, James said, sounding much more awake now. If Elaine turns state's evidence against Kenneth, it strengthens the case enormously. But Martha, be careful. This could also be a ploy, a way to get information about what you know, what evidence exists. I considered that. But you should have seen her, James. She was genuinely shaken. I think she's starting to realize the magnitude of what's happened, what Kenneth has done. Let's hope so. I'll call Detective Rivera first thing in the morning, let him know about this development. In the meantime, get some rest. And Martha? Don't meet with Elaine alone again, no matter what she promises. I agreed, though part of me wondered if I would keep that promise if Elaine reached out again. She was my daughter. Despite everything, despite the betrayal and the lies, some part of me still needed to believe I could reach her, save her, bring her back from the edge. Sleep came fitfully, haunted by dreams of Richard calling out for help while Elaine stood by, watching impassively. I woke at dawn, exhausted but too anxious to remain in bed. I ordered breakfast from room service, then checked my phone. No messages from Elaine. No updates from James or the detective. Just the oppressive waiting, the not knowing what would happen next. At 8 o'clock, my phone finally rang.
James.
Martha, turn on the news. Channel 7.
Now.
I fumbled for the remote, clicking through channels until I found the local morning news. The headline scrolling across the bottom of the screen made my blood run cold. Prominent businessman Kenneth Davis hospitalized after apparent suicide attempt. The anchor's voice filled the room. Breaking news this morning as Kenneth Davis, son-in-law of the late business magnate Richard Harrington, was rushed to Memorial Hospital just after midnight following what sources describe as a suicide attempt at the Four Seasons Hotel. Davis, who is married to Harrington's only daughter Elaine, was reportedly found unconscious in the couple's hotel suite. His condition is listed as critical. Police are investigating the circumstances surrounding the incident. I sank onto the edge of the bed, my mind racing. James? What happened? How did? I don't know many details yet, he interrupted. Detective Rivera called me 20 minutes ago.
He's at the hospital now.
Apparently, Elaine found Kenneth unconscious around 1 a.m. Empty pill bottle, half-empty bottle of scotch. She called 911. After our meeting, I murmured. She went back to their suite and found him like that. Or claimed to, James said carefully. Rivera said there are inconsistencies in her statement. The timing, the circumstances. They're questioning her now. A terrible thought struck me. James, you don't think that Elaine might have? I don't know what to think anymore, Martha. But the police are treating the room as a potential crime scene, not just a suicide attempt. And they're very interested in speaking with you about your dinner confrontation and your late-night meeting with Elaine. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely hold the phone. This is my fault. If I hadn't confronted them, if I hadn't told Elaine what we knew— Stop that right now, James said firmly. You are not responsible for Kenneth's actions or Elaine's. Whatever happened in that hotel room, the responsibility lies with them, not you.
He was right logically.
But the mother's heart doesn't operate on logic. It works on love and guilt and the desperate belief that we can somehow protect our children, even from themselves. What do I do now? I asked, feeling suddenly lost. Stay where you are. Rivera will send an officer to take your statement. Don't speak to Elaine if she contacts you, not until we know exactly what happened in that room. After hanging up, I sat motionless, staring at the television as the news cycle repeated the scant details of Kenneth's suicide attempt. The reporter standing outside Memorial Hospital mentioned that Elaine Davis had been taken to police headquarters for further questioning, but emphasized that she was not under arrest. Not yet, anyway. My phone buzzed with a text. Unknown number, but I recognized the pattern from last night. They think I did this. I need your help.
Please, Mom. I'm scared. Mom.
Not Mother.
Mom.
The name she'd called me as a child, before the formality of adulthood had crept into our relationship, before money and ambition had corrupted her soul. I stared at the message, my finger hovering over the reply button. Part of me wanted to rush to her side, to protect my child as I had always done. Another part, the part that remembered Richard's voice on that recording, speaking of his fears that our daughter might be involved in plotting his death, held back. What was the truth? Had Kenneth actually attempted suicide, overwhelmed by the collapsing scheme and impending criminal charges? Had Elaine found him as she claimed? Or was this another twist in their elaborate plot, a way to generate sympathy, to shift blame, to create confusion? Or something even darker? Had Elaine, recognizing that Kenneth was about to drag her down with him, decided to eliminate the liability he represented? Before I could decide how to respond, another text arrived. I know what he did to Daddy. I found the pills in his toiletry bag. The ones he switched. I didn't want to believe it, but it's true. He killed Daddy, and now he's tried to kill himself. Or wants everyone to think he did. Please help me, Mom. I don't know what to do. This time, I did respond. Where are you now? The reply came quickly. Police station downtown. They're letting me make calls, but they keep asking the same questions over and over. They think I gave Kenneth the pills. I didn't. You have to believe me. Did I believe her? Could I trust anything she said after all the lies? I called James again, reading him Elaine's texts. This changes things, he said thoughtfully. If she's telling the truth about finding evidence that Kenneth tampered with Richard's medication, that's a big if, I reminded him.
True.
But it might be worth hearing her out. Under controlled circumstances, of course. I can arrange for you to meet her at the police station, with Detective Rivera present. You think that's wise? I think if she's genuinely ready to turn on Kenneth, to tell the truth about what happened, we should give her that opportunity. And if she's lying, well, the more she talks, the more likely she is to contradict herself or reveal something incriminating. It made sense. And despite everything, despite all the betrayal, I couldn't ignore my daughter's plea for help. Not without at least hearing what she had to say. Arrange it, I told James. And James, thank you for everything. Don't thank me yet, he replied soberly. This is far from over, Martha. In fact, I have a feeling it's about to get much worse before it gets better. 2 hours later, I sat in an interview room at the police station, James beside me, waiting for Detective Rivera to bring Elaine in. The room was exactly as I'd seen in countless television dramas, sterile, functional, with a large mirror on one wall that undoubtedly concealed an observation room. The door opened and a tall, serious-looking man in his 40s entered. Mrs. Harrington, I'm Detective Marcus Rivera. Thank you for coming in. We shook hands, his grip firm but not aggressive. This is an unusual situation, he continued, but given the circumstances, I've agreed to allow you to speak with your daughter briefly. I'll be present for the entire conversation, and I should note that anything said in this room may be used in our investigation. I understand, I said. Is he still alive? Mr. Davis is in intensive care. His condition is stable but critical. The doctors are cautiously optimistic, but it's too soon to say whether there will be lasting effects from the overdose. And you believe Elaine was involved somehow? Rivera's expression remained carefully neutral. We're investigating all possibilities, Mrs. Harrington. Your daughter's account of the evening has certain inconsistencies that we're working to resolve. Before I could ask what inconsistencies, the door opened again, and Elaine was escorted in by a female officer. She looked terrible, her face pale and drawn, dark circles under her eyes, her clothes rumpled from the night before. Mom, she said, her voice breaking. For the first time since Richard's death, she looked like my daughter again. Vulnerable, frightened, in need of her mother's protection. I stood, instinctively moving toward her, but James placed a cautioning hand on my arm. Let's all sit down, he suggested smoothly. We have a lot to discuss. Elaine took the chair across from me, the table between us a physical representation of the gulf that had opened in our relationship. They think I tried to kill Kenneth, she said without preamble. I didn't. I found him like that. I called 911 right away. Why don't you tell us exactly what happened after you left the garden last night? James suggested. She took a deep breath, visibly struggling for composure. I went back to our suite. I was thinking about what Mom said, about cooperating with the police, about Kenneth being investigated for Daddy's death. And, Rivera prompted when she paused. I started looking through Kenneth's things, his briefcase, his laptop, looking for, I don't know, proof, I guess, that he wasn't involved in anything illegal. But you found something else, I guessed. She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. In his toiletry bag. A prescription bottle with Daddy's name on it. Heart medication. But when I looked closer, the pills inside, they weren't the right ones. They looked similar, but not identical to Daddy's regular medication. Rivera leaned forward slightly. And how would you know what your father's regular medication looked like, Mrs. Davis? Because I've seen them before. Many times. Daddy was very particular about his pills. Had a special case with compartments for each day. He'd show me sometimes, joking about getting old. It was true. Richard had been meticulous about his medication, almost making a game of it to hide his concern about his heart condition. "What did you do when you found the bottle?" Rivera asked. I confronted Kenneth. He'd been drinking heavily since we got back from dinner. He denied it at first, said I was being paranoid. But then, she swallowed hard. Then he got angry, said I was ungrateful, that everything he'd done for us, for our future. He admitted tampering with Richard's medication? James clarified. Not in so many words. But he said sometimes things have to be accelerated when people become obstacles. That Daddy had become an obstacle to our success. I closed my eyes briefly, the confirmation of my worst fears washing over me like ice water. Kenneth had killed Richard, had deliberately hastened his death to gain control of his fortune. What happened next?
Rivera pressed.
We argued.
Badly.
I told him I was done, that I was going to the police. He laughed at me, said I was as much a part of this as he was, that if he went down, I'd go down with him. She looked directly at me. He said no one would believe I wasn't involved, especially not you, Mom. And then, Rivera's voice remained neutral, but I could sense his intense focus. I said I needed air.
Time to think.
I left the suite, went down to the lobby for a while. When I came back about an hour later, he was unconscious on the bathroom floor. Empty pill bottle beside him. I called 911 immediately. Rivera made a note in his small notebook. The pill bottle, was it the same one with your father's name on it? No, it was something else. Something prescribed to Kenneth. For anxiety, I think. And where is the bottle with your father's medication now? Elaine hesitated, glancing at me before answering. I don't know. It wasn't in the bathroom when I found Kenneth. It wasn't in his toiletry bag either. I looked for it while waiting for the ambulance, but it was gone. An uncomfortable silence filled the room. The implication was clear. Either Kenneth had disposed of the incriminating evidence before attempting suicide, or Elaine was lying about finding it in the first place. Mrs. Davis, Rivera said carefully, the timeline you've given us doesn't quite match the hotel's security footage. According to their cameras, you left your suite at 12:40 a.m. and returned at 12:52 a.m. That's 12 minutes, not about an hour, as you stated. Elaine's face paled further. I must have lost track of time. It felt longer. And the 911 call was placed at 1:17 a.m. That's 25 minutes after you returned to the suite. Why the delay if you found your husband unconscious immediately? I mean he wasn't. She stumbled over her words, then stopped, taking a deep breath. He wasn't unconscious when I first came back. We argued again. He was still drinking, still saying terrible things about Daddy, about you. She looked at me imploringly. He admitted it, Mom. He admitted switching Daddy's pills with something that would stress his heart. Said it was untraceable, and that everyone would just think it was his existing condition. And then, Rivera prompted. Then he took the pills. Right in front of me. Swallowed a handful with scotch. Said if I was going to betray him, he'd go out on his own terms. I tried to stop him, tried to make him throw them up, but he pushed me away. He locked himself in the bathroom. By the time I got the door open, he was unconscious. Rivera made another note. That's not what you told the responding officers, Mrs. Davis. You said you found him already unconscious when you returned to the suite. I was confused.
Scared.
I wasn't thinking clearly. Or, Rivera suggested mildly, you're not telling the truth now. Or you weren't telling the truth then. Either way, it's a problem. Elaine looked at me desperately. Mom, please. You have to believe me. I didn't try to kill Kenneth. And I didn't know what he was doing to Daddy until it was too late. You have to believe me. Did I? Could I? The evidence suggested otherwise. The inconsistent statements, the missing pill bottle, the security footage contradicting her timeline. And yet she was my daughter. My only child. The baby I had held in my arms. The little girl I had tucked into bed with stories and kisses. The young woman I had sent out into the world believing I had raised her right. I want to believe you, Elaine, I said finally. But there have been so many lies. So much deception. I know, she whispered. And I'm sorry. For all of it. I got caught up in Kenneth's schemes, his ambitions. He made everything sound so reasonable, so justified. And then it was too late to back out. Too late to tell you, or Daddy, the truth. It's never too late for the truth, I said. But it has to be the whole truth, Elaine. No more half-truths, no more convenient omissions. She looked down at her hands, then back up at me, her expression resolute. All right, the whole truth. I knew Kenneth was planning something illegal with the Westlake deal. I knew he was using Daddy's company to funnel money into his own projects. I helped him hide some of the transactions. Rivera jotted notes silently, letting her continue. I knew he had met with someone about creating documents. I assumed business contracts, maybe backdated agreements. I didn't know he was planning to forge Daddy's will until after Daddy died. She swallowed hard. And, I swear, I didn't know he was tampering with Daddy's medication. I suspected something was wrong with how suddenly Daddy got sick, but Kenneth convinced me it was just his heart condition worsening. And last night,
Rivera prest.
what really happened? Elaine closed her eyes briefly. I came back from meeting Mom in the garden. Kenneth was drunk, angry. He guessed I was thinking about cooperating with the police. We argued. I found the pill bottle with Daddy's name while looking for evidence. Kenneth admitted what he'd done, not directly, but in that smug way he has when he thinks he's been clever. She paused, visibly struggling. I told him I was done, that I was going to tell the police everything. He threatened me, said he'd make sure I went to prison too. Said he had evidence that I was just as involved as he was. Then, he hit me. She pulled back the sleeve of her sweater, revealing a dark bruise forming on her forearm. I ran. Down to the lobby, just to get away from him. I was scared, confused. I called my friend Lisa, but she didn't answer. When I went back upstairs, Kenneth was in the bathroom. He'd taken the pills already. I tried to help him, to make him throw up, but it was too late. He was barely conscious. And the bottle with your father's medication? The evidence of tampering? Rivera asked.
Gone.
Kenneth must have hidden it or destroyed it while I was downstairs. I looked everywhere while waiting for the ambulance, but I couldn't find it. Rivera studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Mrs. Davis, I need to be very clear with you. Your husband is fighting for his life. If he survives, he'll face serious charges, fraud, forgery, and possibly murder if we can prove he tampered with your father's medication. Your cooperation could significantly impact how we view your own involvement in these matters. I understand, Elaine said quietly. I'll tell you everything I know, everything I've seen or heard. I want the truth to come out for Daddy's sake, for Mom's sake, and for your own sake, Rivera added pointedly. She nodded, accepting this.
Yes.
For my sake, too. I've been living with lies for too long.
Rivera stood.
We'll take a formal statement now. Your mother and Mr. Mercer can wait outside. As James and I rose to leave, Elaine caught my hand. Mom, I'm so sorry. For everything. I know you may never forgive me, but please believe that I loved Daddy. And I love you. I just lost my way. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. Not the polished, perfect heiress she had become, but the vulnerable, flawed human beneath that facade. My child, for better or worse. I want to believe you, Elaine, I said softly. Show me I can. In the corridor outside, James placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. That was difficult. How are you holding up? I don't know what to believe anymore, I admitted. Part of me wants to trust her. She's my daughter, James. Despite everything. But another part recognizes the inconsistencies, the convenient timing of her revelations. I nodded wearily. Do you think she's telling the truth now? About Kenneth admitting to tampering with Richard's medication. I think it's possible, James said carefully. The question is whether she knew about it before last night, whether she was complicit in Richard's death, or merely in the financial schemes that followed. And what happens now? Now we wait. For Kenneth to recover enough to be questioned. For the police to gather more evidence. For the truth, whatever it is, to emerge. We sat in uncomfortable plastic chairs in the station's waiting area, neither of us speaking much. An hour passed then too. Finally, Rivera emerged, his expression grave. "Mrs. Harrington, we've just received word from the hospital. Kenneth Davis is awake, and he's asking to speak with you." I stared at him in disbelief. "With me? Why?"
He wouldn't say.
"Only that it's urgent, and that he'll only speak to you." James immediately objected. "That's out of the question. After everything that's happened." "It would be under controlled conditions," Rivera assured us. "Officers present, medical staff on hand. He's in no condition to pose a physical threat." "But why would I agree to this?" I asked. What could Kenneth possibly have to say to me that I would want to hear? Rivera hesitated, then said, "He claims to have information about your husband's death. Information that only you should hear first. And Mrs. Harrington, he says it involves your daughter in ways you don't yet understand." My blood ran cold. What new horror was this? What fresh betrayal waited for me at Kenneth's bedside? "I need to know," I said finally, ignoring James's concerned expression. "Whatever it is, however painful, I need to know the truth." Rivera nodded understanding. "I'll make the arrangements. But, Mrs. Harrington, prepare yourself. In my experience, deathbed confessions are rarely comforting. They're usually the last, desperate attempt of the guilty to spread their burden of guilt to others." "Is he dying then, Kenneth?" "The doctors say it's too soon to tell. The next 24 hours will be critical, which may be why he's suddenly eager to talk." I gathered my courage, steeling myself for whatever revelation awaited. "I'm ready. Take me to him." As we left the police station, I caught a glimpse of Elaine being escorted to another interview room, her face streaked with tears. Our eyes met briefly across the corridor, mother and daughter, bound by blood, separated by betrayal. What truth would Kenneth reveal? What final twist awaited in this nightmare that had once been my family? I was about to find out, and nothing would ever be the same again. Memorial Hospital was a maze of sterile corridors and hushed voices. Detective Rivera led me through security doors and past nursing stations, James following close behind despite his continued objections. The ICU was even quieter, the beeping of monitors and the soft hiss of oxygen, the only sounds breaking the silence. "He's heavily sedated," Rivera warned as we approached a private room flanked by 2 uniformed officers. "The doctors say he can only speak for a few minutes at a time. And, Mrs. Harrington, don't get too close. Officer Chin will be in the room with us the entire time." I nodded, bracing myself for whatever was to come. The Kenneth I knew was manipulative, calculating, and utterly self-serving. Even at death's door, I couldn't trust a word he said. The room was dimly lit, the shades drawn against the afternoon sun. Kenneth lay propped up slightly on the hospital bed, a tangle of tubes and wires connecting him to various machines. His normally tanned face was ashen, his confident demeanor replaced by the fragile vulnerability of the seriously ill. His eyes fluttered open as we entered, fixing on me with an intensity that belied his weakened state. "Martha," he rasped, his voice barely audible. "You came." "I'm here," I confirmed, remaining near the door. "Detective Rivera says you have something to tell me." Kenneth's gaze shifted to Rivera, then back to me.
Alone.
"Need to speak alone." "That's not happening," Rivera said firmly. "Either you talk with us present or not at all." Kenneth closed his eyes briefly, as if gathering strength.
Fine.
"But you won't believe me anyway." His breathing was labored, each word clearly an effort. "You think I killed Richard, that I tampered with his medication. Did you?" I asked directly. A ghost of his old smirk crossed his face. So direct, Martha. Always were, beneath that quiet exterior. "Answer the question, Mr. Davis," Rivera prompted. "No," Kenneth said, his eyes locked on mine. "I didn't kill Richard. Never touched his medication. Never needed to." "You expect us to believe that?" James asked skeptically from behind me. "Don't care what you believe," Kenneth replied, a hint of his old arrogance surfacing. "But Martha should know who really killed her husband." A chill ran down my spine. If not you, then who? Kenneth's cracked lips formed a smile that held no warmth, only a terrible satisfaction.
Elaine.
Your perfect daughter. She switched his pills. Planned it for months. The room seemed to tilt around me.
No.
You're lying. Why would I lie now?
Kenneth wheezed.
Nothing to gain. Everything's fallen apart. To take her down with you, Rivera suggested. Spread the blame. Kenneth shook his head weakly. Ask her about February 15th. Ask her about the pharmacy on Parker Street. Ask her about Dr. Reynolds. The names meant nothing to me, but Rivera was making notes, his expression intent. You're saying Elaine tampered with Richard's heart medication without your knowledge? Rivera clarified. Not without my knowledge. With my help. Kenneth's confession came out in short, pained bursts. She came to me, with the plan already formed. Needed my connections. Knew someone who could get the right pills. Something that would stress his heart, but look natural. And you helped her? I whispered, still unable to fully comprehend what he was saying. She was very persuasive, Kenneth said, his gaze never leaving mine. Said Richard was changing, becoming suspicious of our business dealings. Said he was planning to cut us off completely. We'd be left with nothing. So you're admitting to conspiracy to commit murder, Rivera stated flatly. I'm dying anyway, Kenneth replied with grim certainty. Doctors don't need to tell me. I can feel it. No point in lies now. Why are you telling me this? I asked, my voice barely audible even to my own ears. Why now? Because she betrayed me too, Kenneth said, bitterness seeping through his weakened voice. I protected her, took the risk of getting the pills, helped her plan it. And how did she repay me? By feeding me the same pills when I became inconvenient. The implication hit me like a physical blow. You're saying Elaine tried to kill you? That this wasn't a suicide attempt? Kenneth's laugh turned into a painful cough. Suicide?
No.
She put the pills in my scotch while I slept. The perfect murder, just like her father's. Only I woke up, tasted something wrong. But too late. Already in my system. You have proof of this? Rivera asked. Check her purse. The one she had last night. Small compartment, inside zipper. Richard's original pills should be there. The ones she switched. She kept them like a trophy. Rivera immediately stepped outside, presumably to call officers at the station where Elaine was still being interviewed. Why would she try to kill you now? James asked, skepticism evident in his tone. Because I became a liability, Kenneth said simply. Martha was gathering evidence. Police getting involved. Elaine needed someone to blame. She decided that someone would be me. And everything else? I pressed. The forged will? The Westlake scheme? All her ideas, Kenneth insisted. She approached Reyes about the will forgery. She created the shell company for Westlake. I just helped implement. She was always the brains. I was just the face people trusted. It was too much to process. Too horrific to contemplate. My daughter, my own flesh and blood, the mastermind behind Richard's murder? Behind all of it? I don't believe you, I said finally. Elaine loved her father. Elaine loves money, Kenneth corrected weakly. And power. Richard was going to take both away. She couldn't allow that. Rivera returned, his expression grim. Officers are checking Mrs. Davis's belongings now. They've also initiated a search of your hotel suite. Kenneth nodded, his energy clearly fading. You'll find what you need. Enough to prove. I'm telling the truth. And if we don't? Rivera asked. Then I've failed, one last time. Kenneth's eyes were growing heavy, the medication pulling him back toward unconsciousness. Tell Elaine, I kept my promise. Right to the end. What promise? I asked, but it was too late. Kenneth had drifted off, his breathing shallow but steady. A nurse appeared in the doorway. He needs to rest now. You can come back later, if he stabilizes. In the corridor outside, I leaned against the wall, my legs suddenly unable to support me. James's arm around my shoulders was the only thing keeping me upright. He's lying, I said, needing to hear the words aloud. He has to be lying. Rivera's expression was carefully neutral. We'll know soon enough, Mrs. Harrington. If we find those pills where he said they'd be. Even if you do, it doesn't prove Elaine was behind Richard's death, James argued.
Kenneth could have planted them.
This could be his final act of revenge. Possibly, Rivera conceded. But we'll follow the evidence wherever it leads. My phone rang, the station calling. Rivera answered, listening intently for several minutes before hanging up. They found pills in a hidden compartment in Mrs. Davis's purse, he said quietly. Prescription bottle with Richard's name, but the pills inside don't match the prescription. They've been sent to the lab for analysis. The ground seemed to drop away beneath me. That doesn't mean... Mrs. Harrington, Rivera interrupted gently, they also found a second bottle in her cosmetics case. Same medication, different pills. And a third set hidden in a hollowed-out lipstick tube. A lot of effort to hide something innocent, James observed grimly. I need to talk to her, I said suddenly. I need to hear her explanation.
Rivera hesitated.
That may not be advisable at this stage. Please, I implored. She's my daughter. Whatever she's done, or hasn't done, I need to speak with her. After a long moment, Rivera nodded. We'll arrange it. But, Mrs. Harrington, prepare yourself. This situation is complicated, and it's likely to get worse before it gets better. The ride back to the police station passed in a blur. My mind refused to accept what Kenneth had claimed, what the evidence seemed to support. Not Elaine. Not my little girl. There had to be another explanation. Had to be. At the station, Rivera led us to a different interview room, larger, more formal. Mrs. Davis is being officially questioned now, he explained. Her attorney arrived about an hour ago. Attorney? I echoed, surprised. Carson Blackwell. High-powered criminal defense lawyer. Very expensive. The name triggered a memory, Kenneth's conversation with Elaine that I'd overheard. Carson confirmed it's all set. Not just a business partner, then. A lawyer they'd had waiting in the wings. How soon can I see her? I asked. They should be finishing up now. I'll check. While Rivera was gone, James tried once more to dissuade me. Martha, I understand your need to speak with Elaine, but legally, this is extremely risky. Anything she says to you could be used in court. Anything you say could complicate the case. I don't care about the case, I said, surprising myself with the force of my words. I care about the truth, about understanding how we got here. And if the truth is what Kenneth claimed, if Elaine really did harm Richard, I closed my eyes, the pain of that possibility almost unbearable. Then I need to hear it from her. Not from Kenneth. Not from the police. From her. Rivera returned 15 minutes later. Mrs. Davis has agreed to speak with you. Her attorney advises against it, but she's insisting. I must warn you, she's been formally arrested. The DA is charging her with attempted murder for what happened to Kenneth. And Richard? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. That investigation is ongoing. But given what we've found... He left the sentence unfinished, the implication clear. 2 officers escorted me to yet another room, smaller, more confined. A holding area rather than an interview room. Elaine sat alone at a small table, her attorney presumably waiting outside. She looked up as I entered, her face pale but composed. Mom, she said softly. I stood just inside the doorway, unable to make myself move closer. Is it true? I asked, the question that had been burning inside me since Kenneth's revelation. She held my gaze steadily. What did Kenneth tell you? That you switched your father's medication. That you planned his death. That you tried to do the same to Kenneth when he became a liability. Something flickered in her eyes. Resignation, perhaps. Or relief that the pretense was finally over. Kenneth talks too much, she said, her voice suddenly different. Harder. Colder. Always has. Elaine, I whispered. Please tell me he's lying. Please tell me you didn't. Didn't what, Mother? Didn't take control of a situation that was spiraling away from us? Didn't protect our future when Daddy decided we weren't worthy of his precious empire? The confirmation hit me like a physical blow. I groped blindly for the chair across from her, sinking into it as my legs gave way. How could you? The question emerged as barely more than a breath. He was your father. He loved you. He controlled me, Elaine corrected sharply. All my life, he controlled everything. My education, my allowance, my future. Nothing was ever truly mine. It was all contingent on his approval, his rules, his vision. So you killed him? For money.
For freedom, she countered.
From his judgment, from his disappointment, from his constant reminders that nothing I did was ever quite good enough. I stared at my daughter, this stranger wearing Elaine's face, speaking with Elaine's voice, but utterly unrecognizable in her callousness. When? I asked. When did you become this? Something like hurt flashed across her features. I've always been this, Mother.
You just never saw it.
Too busy playing the perfect wife to notice your daughter was suffocating under the weight of expectations she never asked for. That's not true, I protested. We gave you everything. Opportunities, education, love. You gave me a script, she interrupted bitterly. A role to play in the perfect family drama. Richard Harrington's brilliant daughter. Martha Harrington's beautiful child. Never just Elaine. Never my own person with my own desires. So this was revenge? For a childhood you felt was too controlled. She laughed, a sound so devoid of warmth it sent chills down my spine. This was business, Mother. Daddy taught me well. When an asset becomes a liability, you cut it loose. He became a liability when he started investigating our financial activities. When he threatened to change his will, to cut us off completely. And Kenneth? Was he a liability too? Kenneth served his purpose, she said dismissively. He had useful connections, a talent for making people trust him. But he was getting nervous, making mistakes. After our dinner last night, I knew he would crack under pressure. I couldn't allow that. The cold calculation in her voice was perhaps the most terrifying thing of all. This wasn't a crime of passion or a momentary lapse in judgment. This was premeditated.
Planned.
Executed with precision. Did you ever love him? I asked, not even sure which him I meant, Richard or Kenneth. Love is a luxury, Mother. One I've never been able to afford. She leaned forward slightly. But I did love you in my way. That's why I came to you last night. Why I tried to make you understand. Understand what? That you murdered your father? That you tried to murder your husband? That you lied to me, manipulated me, used my grief against me? That I was trying to protect what's ours, she corrected. Daddy built an empire, yes, but we were part of that. We deserved our share. When he threatened to take that away, he broke the covenant between parent and child. He betrayed me first. The twisted logic of it left me speechless. How had I raised a child who could think this way? Who could justify patricide as some sort of business decision? The pills they found in your purse, I said finally. Kenneth's overdose. There's evidence, Elaine. Real evidence. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. What pills? Richard's heart medication. The ones you switched. They found them in your purse, your cosmetics case, even a hollowed-out lipstick tube. She paled visibly. That's not possible. I got rid of those months ago. Apparently, not all of them. Kenneth, she whispered, realization dawning. He must have. He kept them. As insurance. And planted them in your belongings before taking his overdose. I concluded. Knowing that if something happened to him, the evidence would lead straight to you. The bastard, she hissed. Even now, he's trying to control the narrative. Is that all this is to you? A narrative? Your father is dead, Elaine. Your husband may follow. 2 lives destroyed, and for what? Money? Power? Some twisted sense of entitlement. She regarded me coolly. Judge me if you must, Mother. But don't pretend you're entirely innocent in all this. You raised me to believe I deserved the best. That I was special. Is it really so surprising that I took those lessons to heart? The accusation stung because there was a grain of truth in it. Richard and I had given Elaine everything, perhaps too much. had showered her with advantages and privileges without instilling the humility and gratitude that should have accompanied them. But that didn't excuse what she had done. Nothing could excuse that. "Where do we go from here?" I asked, suddenly exhausted beyond words.
We.
She arched an eyebrow. "There is no we, Mother. Not anymore. I'll fight these charges with everything I have. My attorney believes we can create reasonable doubt, especially regarding Kenneth's overdose. As for Daddy," she shrugged slightly, "they'll never prove that. It's been too long, and the evidence is too circumstantial." "You sound very confident for someone caught with incriminating evidence in her possession." "I've planned for contingencies," she said simply. "I always do." I stood, unable to bear another moment in her presence. This cold, calculating creature wasn't my daughter. Perhaps she never had been. "Goodbye, Elaine." She looked genuinely surprised. "That's it? After everything, you're just walking away? What would you have me do? Forgive you? Help you? Become complicit in your crimes?" "I would have you remember that I am your daughter," she said, an edge entering her voice. "Your only child. Your blood. My daughter died the moment she decided her father's life was worth less than his money," I replied, a strange calm settling over me. "I don't know who you are anymore, Elaine. And I don't want to." For the first time, I saw real emotion crack through her facade. Pain, abandonment, perhaps even a flicker of remorse. But it was too little, too late. I turned and walked out without looking back, leaving her alone with the consequences of her choices. James and Detective Rivera were waiting in the corridor. One look at my face told them everything they needed to know. She confessed. Rivera asked quietly. "Not in so many words, but yes, essentially." "I'm sorry, Martha," James said, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. "Truly sorry." I nodded, beyond tears, beyond grief, beyond anything but a profound, bone-deep weariness. "What happens now?" "The DA will proceed with charges for Kenneth's attempted murder," Rivera explained. "As for Richard's death, that investigation continues. If the lab confirms those pills were substituted with something harmful, and if we can establish a timeline that places Elaine in a position to make the switch, she'll face murder charges," James finished gravely. "And if Kenneth survives?" I asked. "His testimony would be crucial," Rivera admitted. "But given his own admissions of involvement, he's not an ideal witness. The defense would tear him apart on the stand." "He said he was dying anyway," I recalled. "That the doctors didn't need to tell him. He could feel it."
Rivera nodded.
"His condition is deteriorating. The overdose caused significant organ damage. The prognosis isn't good. Another death. Another life destroyed by greed and the twisted love of money. When would it end?" "I want to go home," I said suddenly. "To my house. I need to be somewhere that still holds good memories." "Of course," James agreed. "I'll drive you. Detective, is Mrs. Harrington free to leave?"
For now, yes.
"We'll need further statements as the case progresses, but that can wait until tomorrow." The drive home was silent, each of us lost in our own thoughts. When we arrived, Michael was waiting on the porch, having been updated by James via text. "Everything's secure inside," he reported as we approached. "I've done a complete sweep of the house and grounds. No signs of disturbance." "Thank you, Michael," I said, meaning it more deeply than the simple words could convey. In a world suddenly full of betrayal, his steady loyalty was a lifeline. "I've arranged for security to remain in place," James added, "just as a precaution. And Martha, if you'd prefer not to be alone tonight." "I need solitude," I said firmly. "Time to process everything."
But thank you, James.
"For everything." After they left, I moved through the silent house like a ghost, touching familiar objects, looking at photographs, remembering the life that had been shattered so completely. In Richard's study, I sat in his chair, surrounded by the artifacts of the man I had loved for nearly half a century. "What do I do now, Richard?" I whispered to the empty room. "How do I live with this?" No answer came, of course. Just the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner, marking the relentless passage of time. That night, I slept in our bed for the first time since Richard's death, clutching his pillow, breathing in the fading scent of him. My dreams were chaotic, filled with distorted images of Elaine as a child, laughing and innocent, transforming into the cold-eyed stranger I had faced in that holding cell. I woke at dawn, oddly calm. Whatever storms of emotion awaited me, they would come in their own time. For now, there were practical matters to attend to. Over breakfast, I made a list. People to contact, arrangements to make, decisions about the company, about the house, about the future. My future, a concept that had seemed unimaginable just days ago. James called mid-morning with news. Kenneth Davis died an hour ago. Never regained consciousness after our visit yesterday. I closed my eyes, absorbing yet another shock. And Elaine has been informed. The DA is reviewing the case now, deciding whether to proceed with murder charges for both deaths. The pill analysis came back. They were a potent beta blocker that, combined with Richard's existing medication, would have placed tremendous strain on his heart. So there's proof.
Yes.
Between that and Kenneth's deathbed statement, it's not looking good for Elaine, Martha. I should have felt something, satisfaction, perhaps, that justice would be served. Instead, there was only a hollow ache where such emotions should have resided. Thank you for letting me know, I said automatically. Martha, there's something else. The executive team at Harrington Enterprises has called an emergency board meeting. They're concerned about the company's stability given the circumstances. They've asked if you would attend. The company, Richard's legacy, the empire that Elaine had killed for. It seemed both vitally important and utterly trivial in the face of everything that had happened. When, I asked, this afternoon, 2:00. I'll be there. After hanging up, I returned to my list, adding new items, crossing off others. By noon, I had a plan, not just for the day but for the weeks and months ahead. It wasn't a complete roadmap to this unwanted future, but it was a start. I dressed carefully for the board meeting, choosing a suit Richard had always admired, styling my hair with more attention than I had in weeks. This wasn't about vanity. It was about armor. About presenting a face to the world that revealed nothing of the turmoil within. Jonathan Pierce met me at the entrance to Harrington Enterprises, his expression grave but respectful. Martha, thank you for coming. I know this can't be easy. Nothing is easy anymore, Jonathan, but necessary things rarely are. He nodded understanding, escorting me to the boardroom where the executive team and key board members waited. The conversation stopped abruptly as I entered, all eyes turning to assess me. The widow, the mother of a murderer, the unexpected owner of everything Richard had built. Mrs. Harrington, Harrison Wells, the CFO, stood to greet me. We appreciate you joining us during this difficult time. Thank you, Harrison. I understand there are concerns about the company's stability. I'm here to address them. An uncomfortable silence followed, broken finally by Thomas Granger from the technology division. With respect, Mrs. Harrington, the situation is unprecedented. The media is already running stories about Richard's death potentially being suspicious. About Elaine and Kenneth's involvement. The company's stock has dropped 15% since the news broke this morning. And you're worried about what happens next, I surmised. About who will lead Harrington Enterprises through this crisis. Several heads nodded around the table. Let me be direct, I said, taking the seat at the head of the table that had once been Richard's. My daughter has betrayed everything my husband built. She has betrayed his trust, his legacy, and his life. I will not allow her actions to destroy what he created. No one doubts your commitment, Martha, Sofia Rodriguez said gently. But running a corporation of this size requires specific expertise, experience. Which I don't have. I finished for her. I'm well aware of my limitations, Sophia. I have no intention of trying to run Harrington Enterprises myself. Relief visibly swept through the room. However, I continued, as the sole owner, I do have certain decisions to make. Decisions that will determine the company's path forward. Jonathan leaned forward slightly. What kind of decisions? I opened the folder I had brought with me, removing a document James had prepared at my request. Effective immediately, I am establishing the Harrington Foundation, a nonprofit organization that will hold controlling interest in Harrington Enterprises. The foundation's mission will be twofold: to continue Richard's philanthropic work and to ensure this company operates according to the ethical principles he valued. Surprise registered on several faces as I continued. The day-to-day operations of Harrington Enterprises will be managed by a leadership team comprised of those Richard trusted most. All of you in this room. Jonathan will serve as CEO, with each of you maintaining your current divisions, but with expanded authority. Major decisions will require board approval, with the foundation holding veto power to ensure alignment with our core values. This is unexpected, Harrison admitted, but potentially very sound from both a business and PR perspective. The foundation creates distance from the current scandal while preserving Richard's legacy. Exactly, I agreed. The media narrative changes from daughter murders father for inheritance to widow honors husband's legacy through charitable foundation. The company stabilizes. The work continues. And your role in all this? Mei Lin asked, ever the pragmatist. I will chair the foundation's board, but with limited involvement in corporate decisions unless they directly impact our charitable mission. My focus will be on ensuring Richard's philanthropic vision continues, supporting education, healthcare, and community development as he always intended. The tension in the room gradually dissipated as the executives processed my proposal. It was elegant in its simplicity. I would retain control without assuming responsibilities I wasn't equipped to handle, while the company would benefit from experienced leadership and a positive public narrative. There's one more thing, I added, drawing their attention back. The Westlake Development Project is officially canceled. Any contracts already signed will be bought out at fair market value. The $30 million that would have been invested there will instead seed the foundation's endowment. Jonathan nodded approval. A clean break from Kenneth's scheme. Smart. Not smart, I corrected.
Right.
There's a difference. The meeting continued for another hour as we hammered out details and addressed concerns. By the time it concluded, a clear path forward had emerged, one that honored Richard's legacy while acknowledging the painful reality of his death. As I prepared to leave, Jonathan pulled me aside. Richard would be proud, he said quietly, of how you've handled all of this, of the strength you've shown. I'm not sure pride is the appropriate emotion, given the circumstances, I replied. But thank you, Jonathan, for your loyalty to him. And to me. We'll weather this storm, Martha. Together. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the plaza in front of the Harrington building. I paused, looking up at the structure Richard had built, 20 stories of glass and steel reaching toward the sky. His vision, his creation, his legacy. Now mine to protect. My phone rang, James again. Martha, there's been a development. The DA has formally charged Elaine with 2 counts of murder. Richard's and Kenneth's. The evidence from the pill analysis was conclusive. I closed my eyes briefly, absorbing the news. When will it be announced? Press conference in an hour. I thought you should know before it hits the media. Thank you, James. For everything. Are you all right? Do you want me to come over? No, I said, surprised to realize I meant it. I have some things to take care of. Plans to finalize. After hanging up, I made one more call to Detective Rivera. I understand charges have been filed against my daughter. Yes, Mrs. Harrington. I was going to contact you this afternoon. I'd like to see her. Before the announcement, if possible. He hesitated. I'm not sure that's advisable. Her attorney has advised her not to speak with anyone, family included. Please, I said simply. One last time. Perhaps it was the quiet dignity in my voice, or perhaps Rivera understood the unique pain of a mother losing a child, not to death, but to something far worse. Whatever the reason, he agreed to arrange a brief visit before the press conference. 30 minutes later, I sat across from Elaine in the same holding room as before. She looked different already, the polished exterior beginning to crack, dark circles under her eyes, her hair lank and unstyled. They're charging me with murder, she said without preamble. 2 counts. Daddy and Kenneth. I know. My attorney says they have a strong case. The pills, Kenneth's statement, the financial motive. She laughed hollowly. Apparently, I was very thorough in covering my tracks. Just not thorough enough. Why did you keep those pills, Elaine? Why take that risk? She shrugged, a gesture so at odds with the gravity of our situation that it bordered on the surreal. Insurance, I suppose. Against Kenneth. I never fully trusted him. With good reason, apparently. Yes. A flicker of the old Elaine, calculating, strategic. He was always looking for an advantage. I should have anticipated he'd keep evidence against me, just as I kept evidence against him. We sat in silence for a moment, mother and daughter, separated by an unbridgeable chasm of betrayal and loss. What will happen to me? She asked finally, and for just a moment, I heard the little girl who had once come to me with skinned knees and broken toys, looking to her mother to make everything better. You'll stand trial, I said gently. The evidence will be presented. A jury will decide. And if I'm convicted, then you'll face the consequences of your actions, Elaine. As we all must eventually. She nodded slowly, acceptance settling over her features. And the company? Daddy's estate. I've established a foundation. It will control the company, continue your father's charitable work. The day-to-day operations will be managed by the executive team. Smart, she acknowledged.
Clean.
Removes the taint of scandal while preserving the core business. It's not about business, I corrected her. It's about honoring your father's legacy. About making something good come from something terrible. She studied me with new eyes, as if seeing me clearly for the first time. You're stronger than I thought. Than either of us thought. I've had to be. Another silence, heavy with all the things that could never be said, the understanding that could never be reached. Will you come, she asked suddenly, to the trial? Will you be there? The question caught me off guard. Do you want me to be? I don't know, she admitted. But you're all I have left. The only family. Family. The word that had once meant everything to me, now hollowed out by betrayal and loss. I don't know either, Elaine. I need time. To process everything. To find my way forward. She nodded, accepting this. I understand. More than you might think. A guard appeared at the door. Time's up, Mrs. Harrington. I stood, gathering my purse and jacket. Goodbye, Elaine. Goodbye, Mother. I hesitated, then added, whatever happens, whatever you've done, you were loved. By your father.
By me.
Never doubt that. A tear slipped down her cheek, the first genuine emotion I'd seen from her in longer than I could remember. I know, she whispered. That's what makes it all so much worse. I left without looking back, the sound of the cell door closing behind me a final, definitive period on a chapter of my life that had ended in ways I could never have imagined. Outside the police station, reporters were gathering for the DA's press conference. I slipped past them unnoticed, just another middle-aged woman in a conservative suit, invisible in the bustle of more important people. Or so I thought. Mrs. Harrington? Martha Harrington. I turned to find a young woman with a press badge approaching, recognition dawning on her face. I'm Samantha Way, Channel 7 News. Would you care to comment on the charges against your daughter? Before I could respond, more reporters noticed, converging like sharks scenting blood. Cameras appeared, microphones thrust toward me, voices calling questions from all directions. Mrs. Harrington, did you suspect your daughter was involved in your husband's death? How do you feel about Elaine facing murder charges? Will you testify against your own daughter? What happens to the Harrington fortune now? The onslaught was overwhelming, their hungry eyes devouring my grief, my pain, my private anguish made public spectacle for ratings and clicks. I could have run. Could have pushed past them to the waiting car where Michael stood ready to intervene. Could have hidden my face and fled the unwanted attention. Instead, I straightened my shoulders, lifted my chin, and faced them directly. My husband, Richard Harrington, was a man of integrity, vision, and profound generosity. I began, my voice steady despite the chaos around me. His legacy is not the money he earned or the company he built, but the lives he touched, the communities he supported, the difference he made in this world. The shouted questions quieted as they realized I was actually speaking, giving them something more valuable than a harried no comment as I fled. Today, I have established the Harrington Foundation to continue that legacy, to ensure that Richard's vision for philanthropy and ethical business practices lives on, regardless of the personal tragedy that has befallen our family. Cameras flashed, capturing my composed expression, my dignity in the face of unspeakable loss. As for the charges against my daughter, I have no comment except to say that justice must follow its course. The truth, however painful, must be honored. Richard deserves no less. Mrs. Harrington, one reporter called out, "Do you blame yourself for what happened? For not seeing the signs?" The question cut deep, touching the private guilt I had been wrestling with since Kenneth's revelation. But I refused to flinch. "We never fully know the hearts of others," I said quietly. "Not even those closest to us. I loved my husband. I loved my daughter. That love was real, whatever choices were made by others." "Will you attend the trial?" Another voice called. "I will honor my husband's memory in whatever way seems right when that time comes," I replied. "For now, my focus is on preserving what he built and ensuring something positive emerges from this tragedy." "One last question," Samantha Way called out. "What would you say to other women facing betrayal or loss? What's your message to them?" I paused, considering. This wasn't just about me anymore, or even about Richard and Elaine. It was about all the broken hearts watching, all the shattered lives seeking some glimmer of hope in the darkness. "I would say that grief and betrayal do not define us unless we allow them to," I answered finally. "That even in our darkest moments, we have choices. We can choose bitterness or grace, vengeance or justice, despair or purpose." The crowd had grown silent, cameras still rolling, but the frantic energy subsiding as my words reached beyond the sensational headlines to something more fundamental. I would say that strength isn't the absence of pain, but the ability to move forward despite it, to find meaning in loss, to create something beautiful from something broken. I nodded slightly, signaling the end of my impromptu statement. "Thank you, but I have nothing more to add at this time." As Michael escorted me through the parting crowd to the waiting car, I heard Samantha Way's voice behind me. That was Martha Harrington, widow of business magnate Richard Harrington and mother of accused murderer Elaine Davis, demonstrating remarkable composure in the face of unimaginable tragedy. In the car, protected by tinted windows from prying eyes, I finally allowed myself a moment of weakness, a single tear tracking down my cheek as the events of the past days, the revelations, the betrayals, the deaths, crashed over me in a wave of delayed grief. "Where to, Mrs. Harrington?" Michael asked gently from the driver's seat. I wiped away the tear, straightened my shoulders once more. "Home, Michael. Take me home." As we drove through the city streets, I watched the world passing by outside, people hurrying along sidewalks, couples holding hands in the park, children laughing as they ran through sprinklers. Ordinary lives untouched by the extraordinary pain that had become my daily reality. Yet somewhere in that observation was the seed of healing. Life continued. The sun still rose. Children still laughed. And I was still here, still breathing, still capable of making choices about what came next. Richard was gone. Elaine was lost to me in a different, perhaps more painful way. The family I had cherished, the future I had envisioned, all shattered beyond repair. But I remained, wounded but not destroyed, grieving but not defeated, betrayed but not broken. And in that simple fact, that stubborn, persistent survival, I found an unexpected strength. A quiet determination to honor Richard not just through foundations and charitable works, but through the dignity with which I faced each new day. Through the grace I showed in the face of public scrutiny. Through the purpose I crafted from the ruins of my former life. When we reached the house, my house now, irrevocably and completely, I stood for a moment in the driveway, looking up at the place where so many memories lived. Happy ones and sad ones. True ones and false ones. all part of the tapestry that had brought me to this moment. "Will you be all right, Mrs. Harrington?" Michael asked as he carried my briefcase to the door. I considered the question, really considered it, beyond the automatic reassurances we offer to spare others our pain. "No," I said honestly. "Not for a long time. Perhaps never completely. But I will continue. I will find my way. And that will have to be enough for now." He nodded, understanding the truth in my words. "If you need anything, I'll call," I promised. "Thank you, Michael, for everything." Inside, the house was quiet but no longer oppressively so. The silence felt less like an absence and more like a canvas, blank, waiting, full of possibility despite the shadow of what had been lost. I moved through the rooms deliberately, touching familiar objects, straightening pictures, reconnecting with the space that had been home for so many years. In Richard's study, my study now, I sat in his chair, running my fingers over the worn leather armrests where his hands had rested. "I'm still here, Richard," I whispered to the empty room. "I'm still standing, and I will make you proud. Not of what happened, nothing can redeem that, but of what comes next. Of how I honor your memory through my choices, my actions, my life." On the desk calendar, tomorrow's date stared back at me. A new day, another step forward on a path I never chose but now had to walk. I took out a pen and began to write, not plans or lists this time, but a letter to Richard. All the things I wished I could tell him. All the love that remained, undimmed by betrayal and loss. All the promises I made to myself and to his memory. When I finished, I folded the pages carefully and placed them in the small fireplace, watching as the flames consumed the words, sending them beyond this world to wherever Richard might be. Not because I believed he would literally receive them, but because some rituals help us move forward, help us release what cannot be changed. As night fell, I made myself a simple dinner and ate it on the patio, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. The same stars Richard and I had gazed at together. The same stars that had witnessed Elaine's first steps in this very garden. Eternal, unchanging, indifferent to the dramas that unfolded beneath them. There was comfort in that perspective, in the reminder that my pain, however all-consuming it felt, was but a tiny thread in the vast tapestry of existence. Not because it diminished my grief, but because it placed it in a context that made it bearable. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The media storm, the trial preparations, the foundation details to finalize. A life to rebuild from shattered pieces. But tonight, in this quiet moment under the stars, I allowed myself to simply be a woman who had loved and lost, who had been betrayed but not defeated, who had discovered strength she never knew she possessed. The woman Richard had always seen, even when I couldn't see it myself. The phone rang, breaking the stillness. James, checking in as he had every evening since this nightmare began. "I saw you on the news," he said when I answered. "You were magnificent, Martha. Dignified, composed, eloquent." "I just spoke the truth as I see it," I replied. "Sometimes that's the most powerful thing we can do." He paused. "How are you really? Do you need company tonight?" "I'm managing," I said honestly. "And no, I think I need the solitude. Time to process everything. To begin finding my way forward." "You will, you know," he said with quiet confidence. "Find your way. You're stronger than anyone realized. Perhaps even yourself." After we hung up, I remained on the patio, watching the night deepen, feeling the subtle shift in my heart from overwhelming grief towards something more complex, a sorrow threaded through with determination, with purpose, with the first fragile tendrils of healing. My husband was gone, murdered by the daughter we had raised together. My family destroyed by greed and betrayal. My future irrevocably altered from anything I had ever imagined. Yet here I stood, breathing, thinking, planning, living, not because the pain was less, but because I was more resilient than I knew, more determined than anyone suspected, more capable of facing hard truths and harder choices than even Richard, who had loved me best of all, had fully understood. When my daughter looked me in the eyes at my husband's funeral and hissed, "Don't expect a dime from Daddy's fortune," I whispered to the night sky, recalling how this nightmare began. I felt my heart shatter into 1,000 pieces. But hearts, even shattered ones, continue beating. Continue pumping life through veins and purpose through days. Continue finding reasons to rise each morning, to face whatever comes next. That was the truth I had discovered in the crucible of betrayal and loss. The truth I would carry forward into whatever remained of my life. The truth that would, in time, become not just my survival but my triumph. Not because the story had a happy ending, it didn't. Not because justice erased the pain, it couldn't. But because I refused to be defined by what had been taken from me, choosing instead to be shaped by what remained.
Dignity.
Purpose. Resilience. And the quiet, unshakable knowledge that I was more than my grief, more than my losses, more than the betrayals that had nearly destroyed me. I was Martha Harrington, survivor, builder of new beginnings from the ashes of endings, author of my own next chapter. And that, finally, was enough.